My name is Vince Maiden. I recently took over as the Director of the State Energy Office for Virginia Energy. I live and work in Richmond now. Originally a Southwest Virginia native, if you can't tell from my accent. Born and raised in Smith County, and I'm kind of glad to be back here with folks participating in this event. Volunteered to be here. I wasn't asked originally to be here because I think it's very important to participate in these type of community dialogues. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your life to be here. I know you got other things you could be doing, and we really appreciate you attending. It's a beautiful evening, and you're in a room talking to us, so it's important. Tonight we've got the format. We're going to have some presentations, but there's logistically on the questions. You saw the cards, the note cards out front. So if you have questions, write those questions down. As we're talking, if you think of questions, write those down. We'll collect those questions, and once we get to the Q&A session, we'll go through those questions. There's also a handout that's in the back and on the front table for those who submitted questions in advance. Thank you. Some of those were highly technical questions, and it's good to take our time and answer those. We've given you a handout. We may run into some very technical questions that can't be answered tonight. If we do, we'll take those back and provide them to you and answer those questions. But we will be here after the speaking part to answer your questions until you're ready to go, up to 8 o'clock or maybe longer. So do thank you for coming out. The first speaker we're going to have tonight is Daniel Kessner, but I'm going to go over a few things before we get to Daniel. So we're on the why are we here slide. So these are this is our view of why we're here. So there's hundreds of billions of dollars available in the federal funding that a lot of times communities like Southwest Virginia communities and rural communities historically have been left out of. We believe that we need to really get our fair share of that money into communities like this. We don't want to miss out. You know, I've been in the communities and lived in communities where we always seem to miss out. So that's one of the reasons that I feel like we're here. Many of the programs are targeted toward energy communities. So in these resources, if you're an energy community, which a lot of Southwest Virginia is an energy community, you have a better chance of getting additional resources. Virginia, as I mentioned, is seeking more than its fair share. That's one of our directives is that we go after this federal money that can benefit our citizens and our communities. I'm going to throw up a map of energy communities, and you can see what I'm talking about for Southwest Virginia. So these are really coal mining and fossil fuel power plant communities. So if you have a retired mine, a retired energy production facility, all those count. A lot of these are brownfields. I worked a lot for DEQ for 2 decades at the Department of Environmental Quality, some of it in Abingdon, and I spent the last 6 years before coming to energy doing brownfields redevelopment. A lot of the resources and time that I spent was in Southwest Virginia trying to help those communities and having these kind of dialogues for what the communities want and what the communities need. So I'm really happy to be here tonight, and I am going to turn it over to Daniel, and we're going to have a series of speakers. We're going to try not to take up too much of the time so we can get to your questions.
All right, thanks, Vince. I appreciate that. As Vince mentioned, I'm Daniel Kessner. I'm the Economic Development Program Manager for Virginia Energy. Been with the agency going on 23 years, just in the building right up the hill here in Big Stone Gap, with the former Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, and now Virginia Energy. All the work we've been doing here in Southwest Virginia. I'll talk a little bit about my program, a new program, and some initiatives and some work we're doing at Virginia Energy that I think may be of interest. I'll be brief, but hopefully if you have any questions, we're always available to answer those, and can contact me anytime. And again, I'm here in Big Stone Gap. This next slide, Vince talked about the funding opportunities. You know, a lot of this is as a result of legislation, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Those two pieces of legislation infused a lot of money out there, a lot of funding opportunities, and many of those funding opportunities have targeted energy communities. So, you know, Vince said more than our fair share, but at least our fair share, if not more, right? And I think that's one of our goals when we go after grant opportunities. I know there's a lot on here and it's difficult to see, but that bottom number, this is our current grant plan to try to, we're pursuing over $1 billion in federal funding opportunities, and a lot of that across Virginia, but particularly Southwest Virginia. So a lot of funding for a lot of different programs, and I'll go into a few of those, but really, these funding opportunities are to support economic development and clean energy transition. So, a lot of the energy communities, a part of that criteria are those communities that have been impacted by the downturn in the coal economy. Those definitions and things, and we provided the website there, but at energycommunities.gov, that's part of the White House's interagency working group on coal and power plant communities. A lot of good resources there. Some current projects, and I'll just mention economic development and what I do. We started this in 2020 with a focus on repurposing mine lands. There's over 100,000 acres in the Southwest Virginia coal field that have been impacted by coal mining. Many of these properties, we've worked with them for years through our permitting and a long regulatory history dating back into the 60s. So we've got a lot of experience and a lot of data around these old mine sites and even current mine sites, and have worked on post-mining land use issues for many years. So that was part of what we wanted to do with economic development, is see what can be done and repurpose a lot of these mine sites. And that repurposing, although we talk a lot about energy projects, includes industrial and commercial, manufacturing, recreation, ag in some cases. So it's really all of the above, but those evaluations are done through the mining program for permitted sites, at former permitted sites, and also abandoned mine lands. So that kind of encompasses all the 100,000 acres of abandoned of mine land, or former mine land in Southwest Virginia. And one of the programs that some of you may have heard of, it's been going on for some time, is our Abandoned Mine Land Economic Revitalization Program. Since 2017, when that began as a pilot, there's been over $56 million obligated for projects in Southwest Virginia in the coal field. And there's only 42 projects funded, and I think 10 have been completed, and many others are closing on being completed. And we have an opportunity out there right now. If you go to Virginia Energy's website, you'll see that we have soon we'll be asking for projects to be submitted for the next round of funding for abandoned mine land. And finally, for our current projects, I want to mention a specific pot of money that's been set aside as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that's really for enhanced abandoned mine land reclamation projects, and that's through BIL. And it's a substantial sum of money that Virginia is going to be getting annually to accelerate reclamation of abandoned mine lands in the region. The additional roughly $22 million will be used to look at more large-scale, maybe watershed-based, but it provides funding to take care of a lot of the historic mine problems from the abandoned mine land program, which is all those coal mine features left over prior to August 3rd, 1977. So there's a definition there that we have to meet. A few future projects and some that we're excited about, and I wanted to highlight those. One of those is our Solar for All, and this is in progress. We're working. We've put together a full application for this funding. It's $250 million. It's a U.S. Department of Energy grant. Really excited about that, and that's really for residential solar installation, maybe some storage and some community solar and some other things, but really excited about the workforce piece with that, where there's some training dollars, $8 million will be set aside for residential training for community solar and storage workforce. So really excited about that opportunity. We don't have it yet, we're waiting, so we're keeping our fingers crossed, but many of these funding opportunities are competitive. Some are formula or kind of guaranteed amounts, but others are competitive, and these are all over the country, and a lot of folks are competing for these, but we feel like we have a great chance for this. Another I want to mention is training residential energy contractors, another workforce training opportunity, training grants for electricians, HVAC, auditors, and installers. Really excited about the opportunity to get workforce training out of some of these federal dollars. And with that, Vince?
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, Yeah, and a lot of these programs will run through the state energy office, and there's really just too many that are in the works to talk about. But there's a lot of different benefits, from home energy rebates to opportunities to improve your energy efficiency in your home. Those are going to be great programs that are going to help a lot of people, and we just kind of wanted to highlight some of the other components like workforce. And getting all this on the ground, it's going to be complicated. There's a lot of federal bureaucracy. But I can tell you, I've seen our staff in the state energy office is working tirelessly to try to make sure we get these funds and we can get these funds out to citizens. And they really deeply care about the work they do and the work we do in the energy office and about Southwest Virginia and other rural communities across the state. The next topic we're going to talk about is siting of energy communities, which I think you care a lot about. And I'm going to bring up Mike Skiffington, who's our Chief Operating Officer and long-term employee with the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, now Virginia Energy.
Thank you, Vince. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. As Vince stated, I'm Michael Skiffington, and I'm honored to serve as the Chief Operating Officer for Virginia Energy, based out of our Richmond office. I've been with the agency over 14 years now, and almost 25 years of state service. And just a couple of minor administrative notes. Want to make clear for everybody here that this presentation is going to go up on our website in the not too distant future. The handout as well, we'll have an electronic copy of that available on our website. So keep your eyes peeled for that. So I want to talk a little bit about the siting process for energy projects of any kind and how that generally works here in Virginia. So in addition to housing our state energy office in Richmond and our state geologic survey in Charlottesville, Virginia Energy regulates all mining and gas and oil extraction in the Commonwealth. And that currently includes approximately 32 coal mines and 8,000 gas wells here in Southwest Virginia, and also 440 mineral mines all across the Commonwealth. But what we do not do is we do not regulate the siting or permitting of any generating facilities. And how the siting process typically starts is with something that's called the interconnection process. And these are procedures and standards to ensure that new generation resources of any type can safely interconnect to the electric power system, to the grid, to start sharing those electrons. And that process is dependent upon the type of generation that is being applied for. So transmission level interconnections that are generally greater than 20 megawatts, those are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And those are implemented by an organization called PJM. And what PJM is a regional transmission organization. And they basically regulate and operate the grid for parts of 13 states in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and Virginia belongs to, Virginia does belong to PJM. Projects that are less than 20 megawatts at the distribution level are typically regulated at the state level by the State Corporation Commission, which is an independent state agency that regulates public utilities and many other aspects of commerce in the Commonwealth. These proceedings for interconnection, as I'm going to talk about in a second, are very detailed, very technical, and take a very long time. Public participation opportunities in this particular space are limited, but they are much greater in other areas of the siting process, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So here's an example of how the interconnection process works. PJM typically requires 3 separate, highly detailed, highly technical studies, and as a result of all that analysis that has to be done of those studies, it can take anywhere from 5 to 7 years for any kind of project to get all of the necessary approvals. And it might be a little bit hard to see, but what we've got on the graphic there is a sample of 2 projects that have been permitted. And if you look in the first column of the top project, the application was submitted in April of 2016 and went through all the procedures at PJM, at the local level and at the state level, and finally went into service in January of 2022. So that particular example, almost 6 years. And in the bottom example, 7 years, from December of 2016 to December of 2023. And So all of those processes are obviously very fact-specific and very site-specific to the project that the developer is interested in pursuing. So there's no, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not everything, all processes take the same amount of time. So when you consider siting, I'm going to talk a minute specifically about solar, because the goals that are contained for solar in the Virginia Clean Economy Act dictate that most of the new energy that's coming online is going to be a solar project. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how that process generally works. First, a developer needs to get local land use approval, and the land use process in the Commonwealth does happen at the local level. And some localities are passing zoning laws that prevent large solar development in some areas, and some localities have been welcoming solar projects with open arms. But each locality maintains control over how the land is used in that locality. And then we have state permits. And that is a process that has two avenues to it. And the first is it can go through the State Corporation Commission that I mentioned earlier. They issue what is known as a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, or CPCN. And that's typically can be any sized project can go through this process, but a project that is over 150 megawatts must go through this process. There is a public hearing as a part of that process, where the public can participate and offer their comments as to the viability of the project, and the commissioners at the SEC have to rule that the project is in the public interest before that CPCN can be issued. The second avenue is through what's called the PBR, or the Permit by Rule process, that is regulated by the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. For projects that are under 150 megawatts, those are eligible to use the PBR process, which is designed to be an expedited process to allow more renewable energy to come onto the grid. And there are a 30-day public review and comment period associated with that, and a public hearing is also required. And the plan, as part of that process, several agencies are involved along with DEQ to review the PBR application to determine that it meets all the requirements that are established in laws and regulations. There is also a land disturbance permit that a solar developer needs to apply for, and that includes erosion and sediment control. It includes stormwater management and a plan for stormwater pollution prevention. And finally, a decommissioning plan, where the solar developer has to enter an agreement with the localities to discuss what happens when the project reaches the end of its useful life. What happens to the panels? What happens to the soil in terms of making sure it is stabilized and revegetated for when the project is over and the panels are gone. Now we're going to talk a little bit here about nuclear siting and the public participation opportunities that are contained within that process. At the local level, again, localities with their land use authority typically will have public meetings and public hearings for any sort of large sort of siting opportunity for any energy project. There's also the CPCN from the State Corporation Commission that might be necessary. DEQ may also issue some permits, but primarily nuclear energy is regulated at the federal level by the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. And we're just going to talk very briefly about some of the requirements that exist. It's a very lengthy and detailed process, as you might imagine. And currently, I know there's been a lot of talk about small modular reactors, but at the NRC, currently the typical or traditional nuclear plants and SMRs have the same regulatory requirements, and we've listed a few of them here. It must be in a low population area, must be on bedrock, and geologic concerns have to be taken into account along with seismology, meteorology, and hydrology. Virginia Energy is committed to getting nuclear energy deployed to help address the oncoming generation gap with respect to energy facilities in the Commonwealth, as fossil fuel plants are currently required to be shuttered by 2045 under the Virginia Clean Economy Act. The site-specific current criteria, as I've said, is the same for traditional reactors and advanced small modular reactors, and it's governed by the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We could talk for hours just on that alone, but for a high-level view of the siting requirements, we will leave it there for right now. Vince, thank you. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks, Mike. So, you know, in that presentation, you heard a lot of the things that we don't do, and a lot of the things that are maybe future opportunities for public engagement, permitting processes. I worked in regulatory for 24 years. I've been part of a few lively permitting processes, even in here in Southwest Virginia. There are a lot of regulatory steps to permit any energy facility, but I don't think your dialogue here is being lost, because I think it's important for us to hear from the community how they feel, how the community's what you want early in the dialogue. Even when we're not the primary permitting agency, we do have a stake in energy, and we like to be able to share with you, so you learn from us and we learn from you. That's what I hope we get out of this. But with that, I'll get to issue of the day, and we're going to bring up Director Glenn Davis, who's going to talk about our nuclear update, and then we're going to get into the Q&A, which is, I'm sure, what you came for.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Vince. And I just want to echo everyone else's comments. I appreciate everyone coming here this evening. It is a gorgeous day. It's probably one of the first warm evenings in a little while. So for y'all to join here and share with us is greatly appreciated for this dialogue. So nuclear energy. There we go. Okay, so nuclear energy isn't obviously new to Virginia. Virginia has 2 facilities today, North Anna and Surrey. Today they provide 3.2 gigawatts of energy, about 30% of the energy supplied in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have significant business clusters in Virginia, specifically in Lynchburg. 2 of the largest national and I would even say international players in nuclear energy are BWXT and Framatome, both located in Lynchburg. The atomic physics and nuclear research being done, whether it's by our universities, whether it's by JLab, we have a history of being on the leading edge of some of the nuclear research. And of course, our U.S. nuclear Navy. I'm actually from Virginia Beach, so I grew up with probably 40 nuclear reactors off the coast of our ocean front in any given day. So how do we get here? And this started back in October of 2022 when the governor announced his moonshot. And the moonshot had 3 pieces. The first piece of it was he wanted to deploy a nuclear reactor for energy, an SMR, a small modular reactor. He wanted it within 10 years, which puts us at 2032. And he wanted to make sure that we deployed the nuclear supply chain in Appalachia. And there's a very important reason for that. You see, nuclear energy isn't just about power generation for the governor. It's about the next generation of families in Southwest Virginia. Southwest Virginia used to be the hub of energy, I would say, for the Mid-Atlantic, if not the whole East Coast. And it can be once again. And that's what the governor sees as that huge economic opportunity that we'll talk about here in just a couple minutes. So why nuclear? 2020, we had the Virginia Clean Economy Act. When the Virginia Clean Economy Act rolled out, it was anticipated that Virginia was going to experience, as well as just about every other state in the nation, a power demand growth of 1% to 2% year over year. That didn't hold true. That 1% to 2% is now estimated to be 5.6%. It's a 3-fold increase of what we anticipated and 3-fold more than any other state in the nation. So the governor had his 2022 energy plan. It's an all-American, all-of-the-above energy plan. And when the governor says all of the above, he means all of the above. You saw about $1 billion in grants that we've been taking down from the feds. Some of it for solar, some of it for energy efficiency, some may be for hydrogen, some may be help with the nuclear side. But the governor believes that the only way we're going to fill that 5.6% year-over-year growth is by utilizing all the resources that Virginia can put together for energy in the Commonwealth. And that basically gets us to where we want to be with utilizing our nuclear, our solar, and all the resources. The demand is the important part of the equation. It's truly why we're here. I mentioned the 5.5 or 5.6% year-over-year annual growth. It's expected to peak at 42,000 megawatts by 2034, almost double current levels. And we're trying to meet the load growth and the zero emissions goals that VSEA has and mandated by 2050 for both sides of the Commonwealth. And with APCO's success, even more can come to this region. This is an important chart. So Mike mentioned the interconnection piece. And from time to time, people come and they say, Glenn, the PJM is huge. Look at all this power that's going to come into the PJM, basically the 13 states that we are a member of, 252,000 megawatts as of April 23. Glenn, look at how much of this is in Virginia, over 60,000 megawatts in Virginia alone. Aren't we going to be fine? But here's the number that matters. Our historic completion rate of these projects is 5%. The reason it's 5% is because Virginia doesn't control the interconnection queue. Like Mike mentioned, it's out of our hands. It's at the federal level. Additionally, when you start talking about 6 or 7 years to go through that queue, sometimes by the time you get permission, either you've got zoning issues, you've got supply chain issues, or other concerns develop that it cannot no longer be completed. And so that's why, although we may get excited about how much energy might be sitting out there from a wind or solar or a nuclear potentially in the future, it's that 5% completion rate that is very concerning. So the support that we've gotten from the federal government is very important. And I think the quote from the U.S. Secretary of Energy says it the best. The continued deployment of nuclear energy is essential to confronting climate change. We have an administration at the federal level that is all in on confronting climate change and clean energy. But they've recognized in numerous occasions that the only way we're truly going to get there is with nuclear. So much so that they've put over $400 billion in Department of Energy Loan Program Office funds to help states reach that goal, not including the IRA tax incentives, which come to billions more. The state support for nuclear energy has been enormous. It started out in 2020 with the Clean Energy Designation and some funding for research. And in 2023, the VIN Hub, which is going to help lead when it comes to research for nuclear in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and $4 million into the Power Innovation Fund. So what are we doing now in the Department of Energy when it comes to nuclear? There's two important pieces of the equation. The first is we're meeting consistently with developers, technology providers. There's so many different technologies out there for nuclear. They all tell a good story. Who are the ones that we need to be looking and talking to the most? Which are the ones that a utility or a private entity may bring to the Commonwealth? And we want to be in front of that. The second is looking and identifying existing supply chains. Because every time the governor talks about power generation, and it doesn't matter if it's solar or wind or nuclear, he talks about the supply chain. Not only do we want to have that new power generation to make sure that when you go home every night and you hit that light switch, your lights come on, but we want to make sure we get the thousands of new jobs around these new industries standing up to help grow our economy in the Commonwealth. One of them, obviously, is the small modular reactors. They have a very small footprint, significantly lower cost than our traditional reactors, a significant siting flexibility, much safer design, and significant economic development opportunities. It truly is an expansion and innovation that is essential to our carbon-free, reliable grid. So every so often, we go out and we talk to groups, and they ask us some of the questions that really are important and on people's minds. And even when I go to some groups, in the communities, I get these same questions. The first one being, will Virginia choose, or when will Virginia choose to put in SMR? Where's it going to go? And the fact of the matter is, Virginia will not be choosing a site. We will not be choosing a technology. There are two entities that will bring an SMR to the Commonwealth of Virginia. One will be a utility. The other will be a private company. The Commonwealth of Virginia itself has no say in where it goes and what technology is going to be utilized. The second is the nuclear is not a clean energy source, and that is deniably false. It is significantly clean. The Biden administration has come out and said it truly is the one clean energy source that helps combat the climate situation that they have facing us. Oops. There we go. Spent nuclear fuel will be stored underground in coal mines. Completely false. We're not looking to store spent nuclear fuel in coal mines. Interestingly, if you were to take all the nuclear fuel in the history of this nation and put it all together, it would cover an area the size of just one football field and 10 meters deep. That is all the spent nuclear fuel in the history of the U.S. So what happens to this fuel? Well, today, these are in concrete casts. They're buried in the ground. It's interesting what's going to come around, though. The Department of Energy is actually talking about consent-based siting. They're looking at putting out an RFP where localities and states can bid to be able to take nuclear waste. And they're looking at that for two reasons. The first is, obviously, there's money attached to it from the federal government. The second reason they're looking at it is they believe that there will come a time when we will recycle nuclear fuel. And when that happens, that new industry will stand up where that spent nuclear fuel happens to be. And so that's what the DOE is looking at, is these areas that are willing to raise their hand already and say, we're willing to take it because of the economic opportunity and future it holds. And lastly, it's a question, if we just deploy more solar, we don't need nuclear. Solar is a tremendous resource. When coupled with battery storage, it's a tremendous opportunity for the Commonwealth. But when the sun doesn't shine, when the wind doesn't blow, the lights still need to come on. Nuclear is an always-on, 24/7, 365-day-a-year dispatchable resource. It is the foundation of a clean energy economy. But here's, I think, a slide that kind of sums up the important part. Up until now, we've talked about a lot of facts, a lot of figures that I think are very important to energy. But when you look at this slide, this is the economic opportunity. I mentioned that the governor is very passionate about Southwest Virginia. When he talks about wanting to bring the nuclear economy to Southwest Virginia, not just about power generation, it's about the next generation of families in Southwest Virginia. Constructing a SMR can provide up to 900 jobs during that 4-year construction period. It can provide 300 jobs year over year after that. The economic output could be $500 million a year, and the average wage is $85,000 a year. That could be a game changer for Southwest Virginia, but let's just not talk for a second about the deployment of a reactor. Let's talk about the supply chain itself. When you look at Framatome, one of the leaders when it comes to nuclear R&D and processes, they're in Lynchburg, Virginia. They did an expansion a few months ago. The governor went down there as part of the expansion announcement. They announced a $50 million expansion, 515 new jobs. Average starting pay, $90,000 a year. That's a game changer when it comes to Southwest Virginia. And you take it a step further, you see, it used to be that when you looked at nuclear energy, maybe you looked at, okay, we get the reactor and the jobs. Maybe we get the supply chain and the jobs. But there's so much more to come with it. Just the other day, Google, Microsoft, and Nucor announced a joint partnership where they're going to combine their load to get advanced technology, including a SMR, inside the PJM marketplace. Now you may say, what does that mean? Well, that means that they're looking to bring Google and Microsoft data centers. And so you have the data center opportunity. But what really is exciting is Nucor. Nucor is one of the largest, well, probably the largest, steel manufacturer in the nation. It's one of the hardest industries to decarbonize. It has a ton of carbon footprint. And they're looking to decarbonize their steel industry by using nuclear to power their furnaces. And so not only would a reactor potentially come into the Commonwealth of Virginia mean the jobs on the reactor, it could mean hundreds and hundreds of new jobs and a new steel manufacturing opportunity for the Commonwealth as well. And that's really what the future holds and what this opportunity for all of us to get together and have conversations allows us to talk about. So with that, I'll just say again, I appreciate your time. And Vince, we can move on to the questions.
So thanks for your patience in sitting through our presentation. So I know a lot of us have been to church, so there's this young gentleman in the back that's got a hat. If you have a question on your card, we'll try to come around and collect those questions from folks and begin answering those questions. So, anybody, Ryan? And if your question is going to take an hour to answer because it's really technical, we'll try to get you a written response. But we'll do our best to answer everything that you have. And if you come up with one while we're talking, just raise your card. Sir, thank you. All right, I'll go ahead, since I have a couple, I'll go ahead and get started. So this is for our esteemed panel. I think, Glenn, you're going to answer quite a few of these, but wouldn't a nuclear waste leak be more detrimental than whatever pollution comes from our coal?
A nuclear waste leak would be devastating. Thank God we never had one. Thank God that, I'm from Hampton Roads, Virginia. I mentioned the two nuclear reactors we got down there that supply 30% of our energy. It's about the safety mechanism. It's undeniable that it would be devastating. But that's why there's so much oversight on safety by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. There is nothing harder to cite in this nation than a nuclear reactor. Yes, it would be devastating, thank God, for the safety mechanisms.
I think this one kind of relates to what that question was, is what are the environmental and human risks associated with nuclear plants, and at what radius?
So this is where we might want to get a little technical on some of the stuff, but the reactors today have an EPZ zone, basically an emergency zone, that's mandated at 10 miles. The SMRs will have a much smaller zone. I've heard it's significantly smaller, and it could be 6 acres. We're waiting for the NRC to come down with that. But once again, the key on this, when you look at these reactors, they're what they call walk-away safe. They can't have a meltdown. It gets into the whole how these are built, the safety mechanisms. When there's an issue with them, they automatically shut themselves down. These are not the traditional reactors that you may, think about from the 70s. So when we talk about the reactors, it's not just of what ifs, it's of what has been done so that you don't have these same concerns that we've had in the 70s. And I would say really these conversations where I think I'd like to answer these questions, Vince, is by taking that, and we'll take that back. So we'll supply some of that safety analysis.
Okay,
I
that's
think it'd be
good.
great to share that.
Definitely take that down. And we're not saying there's not environmental risk. Nobody's saying that for a nuclear release. I mean, I worked in the environmental field, did a lot of risk assessment over time. There is a risk, but there's a reason that nuclear industry is highly regulated. And it's because of, if it does escape, there is human health risk and there's risk to the environment. So nobody is arguing that at all. So we'll switch it up a little different direction, but what local sites are being considered? We talked a little bit about this, that we don't exactly pick the sites, but I know there's been some studies. So, Glenn, you want to take that one?
But the answer is not. I mean, what's important is what sites are being considered by entities that could develop an SMR. And the answer is, the Department of Energy does not know of any. We have not had APCO, we have not had Dominion, we have not had a private company come to us and say, we would like to start the investigation process with the NRC on this parcel of land. There isn't one. What I really appreciate about the questions that were asked before we got here, and our team took them, but a lot of those questions depend on the location of the reactor, the technology of the reactor. And that is something that we don't know because no entity has come forward and said, we want to do this technology in this place. Once it happens, a lot of these questions, I think, become very important. And we'll have to have this conversation. But as of this moment, there's no parcel of land in the Commonwealth that has been identified as for deployment of a reactor, and that's under consideration.
I'm going to keep hitting you here, Glenn. So we've got a lot of questions, so thank you for taking the time and writing them down. This does actually help us when we go back to make sure we're providing you information that you need. Can you expand or explain a little bit, Glenn, on why there was such an underestimated need for electricity? Why we missed the mark? What's driving that demand? that we're seeing and the growth that we're trying to meet now with some new development?
That's a wonderful question. Data centers and AI. If you look at it's a graph that we have, Vince, we want to include this graph, Ryan's got it. If you look at the forecast going back to 2020, you get all these graphs that, they all look about the same, and then all of a sudden, I think it's 2021, or 2020, actually two, I think it just shoots up all of a sudden. Or maybe it's 2023, and it's because of estimated growth in data centers in Northern Virginia. Well, data centers are just not Northern Virginia anymore, they're looking at some other areas. And now AI has grown a lot quicker than people anticipated. AI is a lot more data intensive or energy intensive than just a traditional data center. And that really has ramped up the demand curve for the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're the data center capital of the world. It's a huge economic driver for us. We want to stay that way. And then we're going to have to rise to the occasion when it comes to the demand allocation for growth in energy as well.
We're going to go a little different direction here with regulatory type stuff that we don't necessarily oversee, but you may have some insight on, Lynn. So, the state corporation commission has seats that are sometimes all filled or not filled, or and then they change those seats. Like, are these kind of decisions that are made at that level going to be heard over and over again because the seats change, or is there any control over how many times a decision, say, to deploy a facility would go in front of the commission?
No, so just because there's a rollover in judges, there are 3 SEC judges, and what they may be referring to is for a couple of years, we only had 1 permanent judge. We now have 3 judges, by the way, but just because a judge may roll over, they're for 6-year terms, and just because a judge may roll over doesn't mean you hear a case over again. Every power generating facility goes in front of the SEC. Mike talked about the CPUC process. The SEC has to deem it in the best interest of the ratepayer, and then they can approve it or they can deny it. They also get involved when it comes to rates and rate recovery and RAPs and charge recoveries as well. So it all goes through the SEC, but it only goes through them once.
All right, thank you. So will fission-based nuclear energy become obsolete as fusion energy develops? And I'm going to interject a little bit here. So I started my career as a young scientist, let's just say 25, 26 years ago, even though I look much younger. And even then, I was super excited about fusion and the fact that it was 10 years away. And it always feels like it's 10 years away. But I still continue to be excited. But Glenn, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think anything gets outdated. It becomes obsolete. I'd love to see that one day. That technology one day. Who knows when that day may be? In the interim, we've got to make sure that the lights come on. Going around the state, people may disagree on what technologies we should use for power. They may disagree on what technologies should be decommissioned for power. Everyone agrees 100% that when they hit the light switch, the power should come on. And so we're looking at the technology available today, the innovative technology right around the corner, to make sure we meet that demand. And should the technology come on board, my hope is, and this governor will sit here and tell you, that we want to be first in everything. So hopefully we stay in the first, if that technology should ever see the commercial level as well.
Yeah, and I will say, a lot of us, with AI hitting and energy demands ramping up now, we might think it's bad. There's probably a future that none of us can really think about. Maybe some of our kids are starting to think about, and one we may not like with some of the growth. But I think fusion at some point becomes, I'm continuing to be hopeful, a solution to some of our energy problems. So thank you for that question. There's so many good ones. I'm just going to keep on rolling here. So if there was a leak of waste, so we're back to a release, would it possibly contaminate the coal seams that may be nearby, preventing and obtaining of the coal in the future? So would it basically kill any leftover coal mining Would it contaminate those zones? And I think some of the siting stuff that Mike talked about would sort of prevent this, but.
Yeah, I mean, well, first it depends on where it is, but this once again goes back to risk. So there's risks with everything we do. There's a risk that when you leave for this evening, God forbid, you're driving home, there's a risk that you get in a bad car accident.
Thank you, sir.
You're gonna leave here tonight, you're still gonna drive home, but there's always that risk. Like Vince said, everything we do in life has a risk. The question is, how big is that risk? And that's what the state with DEQ, that's what the SEC, that's what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, that's what your local government is meant to make sure that that risk is as close to zero. And honestly, to be completely honest with you, with the NRC, it has to pretty much be zero before they will commission such an opportunity. So, yes, there's a risk of a lot of things. But in life, what we have to do is we have to weigh risk versus reward. And I can tell you the reward is tremendous, because the alternative is one day you're going to turn your lights on, and they're not going to come on. We've seen rolling blackouts. I mean, how many remember Texas? All right. I mean, people died out there because of the lack of power being able to get around. We see rolling blackouts in California. No one in Virginia wants that. So we have to be safe, but we also have to continue moving forward to make sure we fill that energy demand.
Thank you for that. You guys are good. I hope you pack, when the tithe plate comes around, I hope you're this good too. So, are the, sorry for that. So are the reactors meant to prevent any possibility of ever utilizing our coal production here again? And I'll end with exactly what was said. We want our coal.
I mean, actually, Vince, you're probably better, and Daniel's probably better for that one. I mean, coal has always been important to this area.
I think Daniel, you really have been in this industry for a long time. Daniel and I have known each other for a long time, but he's lived the energy landscape in the coal fields and worked at the agency for a long time. So, Daniel, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, this is working okay. The coal being mined in Virginia right now, for the most part, is coal makes steel, right? So, metallurgical coal production will remain. There will always be a need for it. Most of the coal that's being mined right now, a lot for export, but it is for steel production primarily, and we see that trend continue. We see a need for coal for steel production.
Thank you, Daniel. There's a lot of excellent questions, so thank you for taking these in. So I guess this is for nuclear. Will this increase the utility costs for our citizens?
So it depends on what this is, right? We don't know where it's going to be built. We don't know who's going to build it. We don't know the technology that's going to be used. We don't know what the ask is going to be in front of the SEC. I can tell you that the governor said numerous times that he will not do this the way that offshore wind was done. He will not put the ratepayers at risk. Will it impact the rates of a ratepayer? That is the perfect question to ask once an entity comes forward, a utility comes forward, and says, I'd like to build an SMR at this location using this technology. That is one of the first questions I would think that would be asked.
All right, and I've got one. I'll take a shot at answering, and then I'll toss it to you guys. So are the PJM delays, do they apply to nuclear facilities as well as solar and wind? So if a nuclear facility needs to connect to the grid, that process will take time just like other facilities. If it's a solution, say a data center, Google has a bunch of data centers and they want to do let's just call it behind the meter solution, they don't have to worry about that interconnection. That becomes a different story, and those delays may or may not apply to that site. So thank you for that. Utilities. I mean, I know my dad, who's here, he complains a lot about the AEP rates. He's right down here, so don't blame him for anything I say. He's a really nice guy. Just the opportunity, to see me come out of Richmond. So let's see what the next one is. Some of you guys write like me, but some of you write better. How can you say nuclear is clean? The waste will never go away.
So when you say nuclear is clean, it's the power generation piece is clean. And it's not just me saying it, it's the Biden administration saying it. It's everyone saying it. And it depends on how you want to define clean. I mean, so the same debate's been had let's say over wind, you need to produce the blades. Those blades are not made without carbon emissions. There's a footprint to every blade that's on those turbines. Every solar panel you see, there was carbon emissions to create those solar panels. When they need to be retired, there will probably be carbon emissions, regardless of what we do with those blades and those solar panels. So yes, if you trace something from its beginning of a molecule to whatever it is to its retirement, there's probably going to be an impact somewhere. But when you look at the energy itself, does it have a carbon footprint? That's how they define clean. Does it have a carbon footprint? Is it carbon emitting? And the answer is no. Nuclear is non-carbon emitting, which is why you've got the Biden administration putting up so much money and saying that the only way we have a true clean economy and a clean energy plan is with nuclear fuel or with nuclear power.
And this one is, where will this, keeping on the waste category, where will it go? So a lot of nuclear facilities, they store their waste in cask on site at this time. A lot of you probably remembered all the hubbub about trying to find a place for all this to go in America at one time, but there was never a one location solution. So it would be managed on site until there's an alternative solution, which DOE mentioned earlier, is looking for those type of solutions so you don't have to manage that waste on site. There's some optimists who think that waste will be usable and that we can continue to take advantage of the benefit of that material long term. So hopefully there's some value to that waste at some point. Who will build a SMR facility in our area? I think we've all talked about this. There's not been a company chosen to site none of the utilities have picked anybody. I think there's a lot of innovation going on with small modular nuclear reactors, and it's to be determined who's going to build a successful small modular reactor. As Glenn mentioned, the governor always wants to be first, so he's always been interested in doing that in Virginia. I'm kind of giving you a little time to, if I can answer it. Unless y'all get tired of hearing from me, I'll kick it back to him. So, are you proposing a waste facility in our area?
We're not even proposing right now an SMR in your area. There's no entity that's come to us and said, we want to build an SMR in Southwest Virginia. And once an entity comes to the Commonwealth and says, hey, we have a technology, we'd like to look at sites, and we think we found a site, we want to start this process, then this whole process of citizen engagement again starts, and we have to talk about the waste. I mean, what's interesting is, depending on the technology, the whole conversation of waste is completely different. The type of fuel is different based on the reactor in some cases. The length of time that goes before it becomes waste is completely different. And additionally, you've got the DOE looking for solutions. This consent-based siting, what comes of that? When we talk about reactors, we're still 8 to 10 years away from potentially having an SMR anywhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's a long process. And it's meant to be a little bit of a lengthy process because of ensuring significant citizen engagement at every level. So those conversations will be had, but in 6, 7, 8, 10 years, I don't know what those opportunities for waste may be, but it could be send it to another state that has raised its hand and said, send it to us, we'd like it.
All right, I'm gonna bust up the nuclear party here. Somebody's got other questions, not nuclear. So, there's been talk of blue hydrogen projects, carbon capture and storage facilities, and they reference Data Center Ridge. Daniel, you want to share a little bit about, is there anything really happening, or can you show it on a map? I mean, where are we with that type of discussion?
There was a blue hydrogen project that was being proposed, and it was in Wise County. There was one being looked at. That hasn't happened. Again, that's another long-term type of project. It was included as part of the agency's Carbon Safe application. And Carbon Safe is a U.S. Department of Energy funding opportunity that's ran through the National Energy Technology Lab. And that program looks at CO2 emitters, the sources of CO2 and other sources. We looked at regionally, some that exist or some potential one, which that was a potential CO2 emitter, and it was for a carbon storage feasibility study. Carbon Safe, you can find it through DOE's website and National Energy Technology Lab. We proposed a phase 2 project where it's essentially looking at feasibility of storing carbon underground in deep geologic formations. A lot of these projects have been occurring across the country for many years, and there's different phases to each of these carbon storage facility studies. And this is that phase 2, but really it's looking at more at the science, the potential storage capacity, and anything related to the next phase of the study, which would look at how CO2 could be stored in that capacity. So that's really what that was related to. And was there anything else in that, Vance? I mentioned? Yeah, the carbon capture is part of that Carbon Safe program, where it's looking at potential carbon storage facilities. Virginia has some geology. It's actually stacked geologic formations, and this is deep underground that may be suitable for carbon storage. So that's what the Department of Energy is looking at.
And here's a question I'll answer is a nuclear plant in Southwest Virginia a certainty? I would say there could be one that's a possibility in our future, but there's no certainty, there's no site, there's no location. And the other question, I think, is as a philosophical question, could public opinion or disapproval stop development? I mean, I think America's been built on dialogue, opposition, people voicing their opinion. I think that dialogue can always influence decisions. So I don't think that's ever going to be, out of the equation. We're here hearing from you. We ask you to hear from us, and we want to hear from you. And I think that's just dialogue, and I think it's healthy for us to have that dialogue. So why does it matter if an area is low density and populated? So I guess that question is, why is that a requirement? Is it because it's dangerous? Is it because for nuclear siting?
So right now, for example, with the reactors we have, it's a 10-mile, what they call an EPZ zone. It's a mandate from the NRC that it has that. Should something happen, that's just the mandated area that has to be clear for that to be sited. It'll be a much smaller parcel, a much smaller mandate from the NRC with a SMR, but there still will be a mandated area.
All right. Cards keep on coming. Some of these are repeats, that's why I'm skipping some of them. So I think this is a siting when we talked about how can you build a nuclear power plant on abandoned mine lands when you can't even build a house on them? Too unstable. I think the answer is you're Daniel, you want to answer that one?
A lot of factors go into even siting anything on mine land. A lot of it's how the material's been handled on site, but there's field material, even a lot of solar projects we've looked at, some consideration about how solar can be installed on mine land. There could be void space in material, could be large boulders. So geotechnical studies are being done for solar projects. And I think there's a lot of that work and study need to be done to consider any site for anything, but certainly for any nuclear facility, a lot of that has to be taken into consideration. But again, sites vary quite a bit, mine land sites. Some sites are down at bedrock, some sites are on more field material. It really just depends on each situation and where that mine site is at and how it was reclaimed if it was. And so there's a lot of siting considerations around stability, and that will require geotechnical work to determine that.
So which one of you gave me the blank card? I can't read your mind, so sorry. It was the exact same question, but yeah, I'll try to do that. the front car is crossed out, so I'm switching to the back one. Aren't nuclear plants targets for terrorists?
I mean, we've had 2 nuclear plants, providing 30% of our energy, and they've never been a target. I mean, the last targets we had were the Empire, or not, was 9/11 and the buildings we had there, and then of course the Pentagon. I mean, everything's a target for a terrorist. Right now, once again, it's about safety. And that's why I think it's really important, because you may be surprised on how safe these things are. Even if something should happen like that, it's amazing when we talk about walk-away safe. And we'll get that answer out, because the answer to that question is extremely deep, with the safety mechanisms built in, even if something like that should happen.
Yeah, and I appreciate the snark in this one, but is the governor going to put one of these reactors in his backyard?
I would tell you that if I grew up in Virginia Beach. I am very proud of the area I grew up in, that I was raised. Just like I'm very proud of this area, and you have amazing state senators and delegates. I will tell you that if I could if a reactor were to come to Hampton Roads or to Virginia Beach, I would be the first one out there saying, we'd love to have that economy. The answer is yes. Not because of the power generation. I mean, you can put a reactor just about anywhere and get the power generation. Like I mentioned, for the governor, an SMR opportunity in Southwest wasn't just for power generation. It was about the next generation of families in Southwest. The reason why it's such an amazing opportunity, the reason why there are areas raising their hand and saying, we'd like to have another reactor, is because they understand that these things are enormously safe. They understand the enormous economic opportunities that come with them. And that's why the governor, he's so passionate about Southwest Virginia, and that's why he talks about it in Southwest Virginia, was he knows that Southwest Virginia, if it wants it, could be the hub of energy again, just like it was decades and decades ago. It's there for the taking. It's not a pipe dream. This has always been seen as the energy hub of the Mid-Atlantic and the East Coast. And there are industries that are looking for a place to come, that they need the land, that they need the workforce, that they need water, they need so many different things. And I'm sitting here in Southwest Virginia, and to go back to the other question I was asked and Vince's answer, yes, public opinion will make a difference. And that's why I think it's so important to have these types of dialogues, because it's important for everyone to understand the facts and the opportunities before that decision's made, because that decision's in front of you. And if you want to do it, not only will public opinion maybe kill an opportunity, public opinion can also make one happen. And that's what's in front of you all.
So let me find it. I'm trying to group some of these while we're on a roll. So there's a question about the SMR and whether 300 jobs, question mark, is that a real number? And I guess they're trying to figure out, is that right? Is that number right? 300 actual operational jobs.
It's an estimated number. Depending on the technology, the numbers are all over the place, so we kind of took one in the middle. Are there significant opportunities and jobs around an SMR? Yes, there is. Is it 150? Is it 300? Depends on the technology. Depends on who the operator is. But what is not questioned is that there are jobs. What's not questioned is there has to be a supply chain. What's not questioned is that there is a multiplier for every job created for an SMR. The estimate is that there's about 2.5 jobs, indirect jobs created. If there was, we talked about Framatone's growth of 515 employees all of a sudden in Lynchburg, making a starting pay of $90,000 a year. Could you imagine if around Wise, Virginia right now, there was 515 new jobs all of a sudden announced with a $90,000 starting salary? How many more restaurants would be opened up? How much more would, the grocery stores, what would the demand be? What would the other jobs, the spin-off jobs created around? That's the opportunity. And so, no, I can't give you a hard number that I can promise you on my firstborn that is going to be exactly right, but I can tell you that there's a heck of an upside. And it's not even just the jobs related to the reactor.
Yeah, here's another electric bill question. Will this decrease our outrageous electric bills? I think with all energy production, we've all experienced increases from increase in gas prices. Historically, we burned a lot of coal. Prices would go up and down. We've all seen our electric bills go up and down. I don't think there's a number because we haven't built it. It hasn't been proposed on on what a nuclear facility, but we also have seen prices tend to go up.
I will say something, because there's the important portion. I mean, over time, we've seen utilities build facilities, and that gets passed to the ratepayer. But what we haven't seen, and what's being talked about, and Vince, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, power behind the meter. You know, or a CSP, a competitive service provider. There could very well be a private entity that comes to Virginia and says, I'm going to build nuclear. I've got a set of investors. And by the way, my electrons are cheaper than the electrons you're buying today. And Dominion says, great, we'll do a purchase agreement for those electrons, and we'll give those to our customers. And if there's lower cost to us, it's a lower cost to the customers. Now, I'm not saying that your electric bill is going to go down. I'm not saying it's going to go up. What I am saying is, depending on the technology, depending on how it's done, depending on the innovation available 10 years from now, is going to decide those. And those are the questions that, when there's an opportunity in Southwest Virginia, those are the important questions to ask. And at that point, you probably get the answers that are important.
This card about a three-part question, and one of the ones you asked earlier, why are you calling nuclear clean energy? Because of the radioactive waste. You kind of answered that one.
Yep.
There's two, I think, here that get at the crux of what a lot of people feel. And why are we talking with investors and keeping people in Southwest Virginia in the dark? Why are you saying that SMRs are affordable when nuclear is one of the most expensive electrical generators?
So let's talk about in the dark first. So our conversations about developers are just, what's the technology? What are y'all doing? There's a lot of technologies out there. We want to be able to be in the know. So if an entity comes and says, hey, we have a technology and we have a parcel of land, we don't want at that point, as the Department of Energy, be running around trying to figure out what they're talking about, right? So we're not keeping it but the conversations about investors, the investors are talking, if there's investors, it's a utility or a private company, go into investors, go into New York and trying to get money for these. And those conversations, they're not disclosed to the Department of Energy, nor do they need to be, right? That's the private company conversations. So that's, as we mentioned, it's not the state that will decide what to bring and when to bring it and where to bring it. It's the utility or the private sector. Vince, what was the second half?
So that was in the dark. So why are you saying that SMRs are affordable when nuclear is the most expensive to generate electricity?
First off, and so Ryan, the gentleman over there with the ball cap, may look very young, but I would put him up against any modeler that works at just about any nuclear company I know. And so we've modeled, and no, nuclear has a lower cost of energy than a lot of other sources, lower than wind. But I'll tell you what's important to keep in mind is it's not always about the cost. So let's say, for example, and we all know what happened over on the west, the west side with Utah and Idaho. There was a reactor that was supposed to be built, a NuScale reactor, and it was going through. It had cost overruns, and it stopped. Now, it didn't stop because of technology. NuScale is the only reactor that's been through the full NRC process. Technology is sound. What happened was they had significant cost overruns. And the consumer, the buyers of that energy were consumer buyers, and the cost per kilowatt hour was too high for them to be able to get the demand that they needed for the offtake, for entities to want to take this power. But what's interesting is what we're looking for in Virginia is power for data centers. And the price elasticity for data centers is much higher. If you go talk to any data center, talk to a Google, talk to a Microsoft, talk to a Standard Power, they'll tell you it's not about cost. It's about reliability. The most important thing to a data center is will they have access to the power they need when they need that power. Because they signed something called 5-9 agreements, that their commitment to their customers in that data center has to be on 99.999% of the time. So it's not about the cost of a kilowatt hour. That's not the most important thing. So when we talk about is it affordable, depends on who the customer is. And there are data centers today, Google. You probably saw recently Google, Microsoft, and NuScale. This is extremely important. They came together as a partnership, and they put out an RFI that they want to come to an area in the PJM marketplace, and they want to bring on new innovative power generation, including SMRs. And they're willing to pay more for that electron than what they might be able to get today because, one, they want clean energy. Two, They need it reliable 24/7. So they're already out there saying, we want to be able to bring this to an area in the PJM marketplace, and we hope it's Virginia, for their data centers and for that new steel manufacturing facility that NuScale is looking to bring, or that Nucor is looking to bring.
I've got some on notebook paper, so I'm now going to be unbiased situation. I'm going to my notebook paper ones here. You say nuclear in Southwest Virginia is for the betterment of future generations in the region. Why do you assume that it's best for our communities, and without asking our opinions and such? I believe you haven't. If you believe you haven't assumed as such, please provide a rebuttal. I mean, from my point of view, we are here today having a dialogue. We are here listening to the communities. I think the governor has shown that he's listening to Southwest Virginia. But I guess, Glenn, what would you say in rebuttal to that comments and question?
That the poverty rate across Virginia is 10%. That the poverty rate in some areas in Southwest Virginia is high as 29%. That opioid addiction and overdose deaths are higher in Southwest Virginia than anywhere else. But they don't have to be. Opioid addiction is a function of poverty. A lot of things are a function of poverty. And this brings a potential economic boom that comes once in a lifetime. We have seen many times a population shift and a demographic shift in parts of the country. And it happens because of new technology and a new industry. Southwest Virginia has the opportunity to land a new technology inside of a new industry and grab jobs that could be $90,000 a year for thousands of jobs in Southwest Virginia. That's why I say that. Now, I'm not going to make the decision should it come here. And your voices are going to be very important on whether an SMR comes here or whether a supply chain manufacturer comes here. But the reason why I say it's a huge opportunity is, so I've been to Southwest Virginia probably 30-some times since 2016. I had 2 statewide races. I used to be in the General Assembly. I've been invited into homes, invited into companies. I've sat around tables with families, talking to children, and been in schools. And what has always bothered me the most as a legislator is looking at a child, knowing they're bright, they could be have an amazing future, but knowing what the odds are. When I go around the Commonwealth of Virginia and I meet children, what always bugged me was that child has such an opportunity to achieve the American dream, but I know what the odds are for that zip code. And it's not because of, it's not because of the parents, it's the resources available. And so that's why I think this is important, because all the things that challenge Southwest Virginia are things that economic opportunity can make a huge dent in. And that's why I think this is one of them. But once again, you're going to make that decision.
I'm going to read this is a comment, but I'll go ahead and read it in the spirit of reading all the cards. I came here against nuclear plants in our area. I'm now at least on the fence. Please just keep us informed, was the message of this speaker. It says, I came here against nuclear plants in our area. I'm now at least on the fence. Just please keep us informed. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I was talking to one of the people in the media earlier, and they said, why haven't we had these conversations before? And I'll tell you, it was a little bit of a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. You see, you're not going to see a reactor for 8 to 10 years, right? And so the thought was, do you really want to come out and have conversations when we can't tell you what the technology is? A lot of the questions that were asked earlier, we appreciate that, and some here today, we can't answer because we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what the technology is going to be. But the fact that you all want to come together and talk about it this early, thank you, because it's all about the dialogue. To be able to have this dialogue so far in advance is going to put things so far ahead when an opportunity arises in Southwest Virginia. And it is about that two-way dialogue. So I appreciate the comment, and I'm really excited that we do have this opportunity.
I'm going to go back to some long-form answers here, questions. Far Southwest Virginia citizens are concerned about remotely operable SMRs and data centers to possibly spawn across the region, and that these will not create many permanent jobs or local jobs. What is your response?
So once again, it goes back to who's the developer, what's the technology? I mean, I can't tell you that there won't be remote, and I can't tell you there will be remote. I mean, the technology changes over time. We all have a computer the size, what used to be a whole wall in a government building for a computer is now sitting on your wrist right now, right? So things always change. But what I can tell you, someone's got to build that reactor, and that's jobs. And someone's got to have to create that supply chain, and that's jobs. And then someone's got to provide the restaurants and everything in that trickle-down scenario, and that's jobs. So I know that there's jobs associated with it. I can't tell you the technology, but once again, this is a question that needs to be asked if someone comes forward and says, we want to build this technology on this piece of land in Southwest Virginia. And this is a very important conversation to have at that point.
So is Virginia Energy researching health and environmental risk on nuclear implementation in Southwest Virginia? So the answer is no. We're definitely not the prime person on environmental health and environmental risk. Even DEQ with nuclear facilities, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission oversees that. They have people that are invested in that through the permitting processes. There's continuous research in the federal government about those risks that inform the safety of the facilities, but that's not in our wheelhouse, and we wouldn't even have the staff to do that type of analysis. So, giving nuclear a break, Daniel, this looks like maybe your territory. So, and I like the fact that somebody knows there's 100,000 acres of abandoned mine lands down here. I say that a lot. So, Daniel must be messaging, or somebody knows what they're talking about here. So, how many of those acres are privately owned, and what is the responsibility of those owners, the cost for reclamation? This is a reclamation question. So privately owned, how many acres, thereabouts, and if you can't answer that question, what is the responsibility of those owners?
Yeah, and there is a lot of privately owned. The state doesn't own any of the mine land in Virginia, in Southwest Virginia, so all the land is privately owned. But I think the question is really talking about maybe corporate ownership of large tracts of land in Southwest Virginia. And we all know through the mining history, natural resource companies own a lot of property throughout Southwest Virginia. Now, as far as the reclamation requirements, if it's a permitted site, the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act and our regulatory program oversee those reclamation requirements as part of the permit. Since we talked about abandoned mine land and that definition of August 3rd, 1977. That's the date that's used to determine whether it was an abandoned mine land or not. But since the permanent program for SMCRA, the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, reclamation requirements for all mining has been regulated. Now, I think you might be talking about conditions of some sites that have set and haven't been reclaimed yet. Those permittees are still responsible for that reclamation. So I think there's been questions about time frames and stuff. So there is a regulatory process and requirements, and there's also reclamation performance bonds. So there's a mechanism for ensuring that those sites get reclaimed. But I think was there any other part of that, Dan?
I think you got it. So have you worked with any local grassroots or political interest groups, community groups, I think, to get input from those groups? So I would ask, who here participates in a community group or grassroots organization or a political interest group? I mean, I've done that in my communities. So, we're here and you're here. So I think this is part of the dialogue. It's early in the game for this subject and this subject matter. You're here because you care, right? You care about Southwest Virginia. You care about the issues that matter to you. We're here because we want to hear from you and we want to share information. And I think that's going to continue, Glenn. Are we going to continue to have this dialogue?
We have 4 more of these. The governor actually announced it yesterday, but Mike already had it planned. We have 4 more of these town halls in Southwest Virginia already planned, 1 a month for the next 4 months. Mike?
As we talked about at the first meeting, they're going to be moving around the coal fields. The next one, we haven't scheduled yet. It's probably going to be late April. It's probably going to be in Flintwood. We anticipate a meeting in Grundy. We anticipate a meeting in Gate City. We anticipate somewhere else that is escaping me right now. But we serve all of the citizens of Virginia, all of the citizens of the coal field, and we feel it's important to get out to as far away, all parts of the coastal region as we can. That's important.
It's not coal.
Scott County has been historically a coal producing community.
So we're going to switch off of nuclear again for a minute. For our hydropower lovers, why have you not mentioned hydropower? And in Virginia, we don't have a lot of hydropower at this point, and there's been some interesting proposals to do pump storage and things like that. But Daniel, Glenn, you want to weigh in on hydropower and why that's not a big thing here in Virginia?
I'll just mention the technology and innovation around like pump storage hydro. Pump storage hydro, for those of you not familiar with it, typically it's surface reservoirs, and I think one of the largest ones in the country is in Virginia in Bath County. So that's one older technology that is being looked at again to provide power during demand. So, if you're traditional, you want to talk about traditional hydro?
I mean, you can. I was just going to mention hydro is amazing. Out on the West Coast, a ton of hydro. It's just we don't have, in many cases, the topology and other things necessary to kind of have it built out the same way they have and once again, we don't control what gets built, right? There are utility companies. They come and say, we want to build this power generation. They go to the SEC and say, here's what we want to do, here's the amount of power it's going to provide, here's what it's going to cost to build it, and here's the impact on the ratepayer, and the SEC says yes or no. It's not something that the Virginia Department of Energy can get in and say, we want you to do this, go do it.
I heard an interesting story the other day. Apparently there's an Indian tribe that has hydropower, that they're moving aggressively to solar because they want to take out their hydro dams to restore the ecosystem. And that is a community-driven advocacy decision to actually get rid of hydropower in favor of solar. So I think, hydro comes with its other problems. When we dam up an area, that ecosystem is changed, and it's changed forever. So I think that would come with a whole different interest. In Virginia, there's just not been a lot of opportunity. They're kind of expensive projects to build in this day and age, and they may not be as favorable cost-wise as they once were when some of the early ones were built. So, this is two questions, similar answers probably here. So you keep saying that Virginia Energy, has nothing to do with SMR sites. Why did you put $50,000 into a study to identify 7 potential sites? The second question was, if no entity wanted to build here, then why was it published in our newspapers that there were 7 areas here named by Youngkin and others?
Well, there was $50,000 put into it because a locality asked for it. Locality said, we want to do this. Would the state contribute? We thought it would be great to have more information, whether it's for the citizens to be able to see what sites. Is there even an opportunity here? Potentially, if something were to pop up, if an entity were to come to Virginia and say, I'd like to be in Southwest Virginia, is there even a place that they could even potentially look at? So Virginia put in $50,000 because we were asked. Why was it in the newspaper? Because people reported on it, right? But that's why information's never, just like dialogue is never a bad thing, I don't think information's ever a bad thing either. And that's why that was, I'm sure, done by the locality.
So this question, back to our favorite subject, nuclear. So you say that that nuclear is clean energy, and it's going on to refer to the waste, and suggesting that the SMR waste would potentially be more harmful or at higher levels of radiation. And referenced a Stanford study on that waste generated from potential SMRs, which are not quite here yet. So, any thoughts on that? I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Yeah, so we have to look at that. We'd have to look at that study. I mean, I don't know what fuel they're talking about. There isn't just one type of fuel now for these SMRs. So we have to go look at that. It's clean power. But as far as we look at the waste scenario, what is the impact of the waste? It depends on what the technology is, and honestly, what the opportunities are with the waste 8-10 years from now. We've mentioned a couple of times, can it be stored on site? Of course, we see that done today in these huge concrete casks. Is it going to be site-based or consent-based siting? Quite potentially. How much waste? Depends on the technology. So it's a great question. It's just a question for when an entity comes and says, we want to do this, we've decided on the technology, and we want to do it at this location. And then I think that's an important question to ask.
This is another question about the 300 jobs associated with SMR that we've answered previously. Can't we meet data center, hydrogen, and Bitcoin demand causing these increases in Virginia by requiring that these industries operate efficiently and provide their own resources and energy instead of placing the burden on the existing ratepayers and businesses? So there's the question part of it. So this is really about, so if data centers, the generation of hydrogen, Bitcoin, if that's all driving our demand, so why don't we, instead of putting it on the ratepayers, force those industries to produce the energy instead of burdening the ratepayer?
So two scenarios there. So first, if let's say a utility builds an SMR, obviously they're going to charge for that power for a data center, right? So they're going to bear the huge brunt of it because of the power they're using. But exactly what is said there is exactly what might happen. There are discussions of data centers coming and looking at nuclear SMRs behind the meter. In other words, that it's a power generation opportunity that it never goes across the grid, that it literally connects into that data center and supplies the power to that data center. And that would do two things. One, it does become the cost is burdened by the data center. Secondly, that burden is no longer needed if it's an existing data center that uses power generation behind the grid. It's the demand taken off the grid, which helps with the reliability of the grid going forward. So there are a lot of solutions we're looking at, and that is one of them.
There are a couple of comments here. Talked about data center demand, but they also pointed out that the data center in Wise County has 4 employees. And I don't know the facts on that one, so I can't answer that one. Yeah. Yeah, Daniel can.
And this is something, we probably should get back to you on an answer on, but there's a lot of differences in data centers. I think a lot of the ones people are thinking of are like Bitcoin operations. They're not all Bitcoin operations. A lot of it is tied to the Internet of Things, how those data centers are used and what they're used for. You mentioned artificial intelligence, AI, the increase in that and what's going on through the Internet of Things. But I think, we could look at answering that question a little bit more, because it depends on what the data center's doing. Depends on security around what data they manage and handle. Depends on the scale and the size of it. Some of the larger data centers do employ a lot more folks. So I think a lot of the Northern Virginia data centers, and I don't have the data in front of me, but significant difference based on scale and what goes in those data centers as far as the number of jobs. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at and answered as well, so everybody understands those differences. Because I don't know all the differences, I just look at some of the data, but there is some information there I think we need to look at and share.
That's one Brian, where you're at. Put that on the just find out some more information. Make it available to folks about the different types.
Thanks, Scott.
On top of it. So, this is another comment. I came here in favor of a reactor. I want to grow, but I also want my hometown to remain safe. Don't let us down.
Amen. I mean, ultimately that's what it's about, right? I mean, you want the growth, you want opportunity for the next generation, but you don't want to sacrifice safety. And that's why it's important to have this dialogue. I mean, all these questions about safety are questions that need to be answered. You're not going to feel safe, you're not going to feel comfortable with the technology until you get to ask those questions and get answers and probably do more investigation. And that's why it's so important for us to start early, because you're right, the person who wrote that question, it's a huge opportunity. You want the better for your community in the future and the next generation, but you don't want to sacrifice their safety for it, and that's why it's important to have the questions answered.
The safety and the community being safe is probably the one thing we all can agree on. We have a lot of different opinions probably in this room. But that safety, if you don't agree with that, I'm kind of a little worried about you.
Yeah.
We should want everybody that we know, love, and care about, no matter where they live, to be safe. And we should do this in a safe way. We can support it. We need to keep being active and
Vince, just, there may be a document out there that we can supply with the onerous, meticulous requirements and details from the NRC when it comes to siting and SMR. I mean, it's, when we talk about safety, and once again, there's a federal regulatory commission out there that is basically its sole job is to be the one that can license these things and ensures the safety of the operation of these things. So, and I'll tell you, the first lady that you ever want to see about that, April, can you please stand up? April Wade, or at least raise your hand, April. So, VNEC was created 2013, April? Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay, so VNEC, so the Virginia Nuclear Consortium, there we go. Yeah, and so so it is the entity in Virginia that is it is the only entity basically that goes and represents the nuclear industry educationally. Research and development right now is the entity that will be setting up or starting the VinHub that we talked about. But I would tell you when it comes to someone an expert that probably knows just about everything on industry and some of the players is April in the back. And so as things move forward, you will be probably talking with April or others from her organization as well. Because in a bipartisan manner, the Commonwealth of Virginia stood up VinHub just to make sure that we started going down this route early to get the necessary information to get Virginia started, but in a responsible and reliable manner.
So last week's Board of Supervisors meeting, a young woman whose family has been here for 5 generations said she would move if the reactor comes here. Do we want this? Do we have to leave to feel safe from reactors? And, you know, leaving to me is a personal thing for Southwest Virginia. I grew up here. I left to take a job opportunity. I missed home. I came back and worked here some more. And then my family and I left again. And I really found that I could serve this area through my work in Richmond and the different agencies in Richmond just as well as I could here. So though I missed home, I found a new home in the suburbs of Richmond. But I don't think anybody wants to see an out-migration of people, whether it's because they feel unsafe or whether they feel like they don't have opportunities or because they've lost hope. So I don't think anybody in this room or anybody on the stage wants to see that type of thing happen, and that we would want people to feel safe. If this is deployed, I would hope that all the right steps by all the regulatory agencies would help people feel safe and they would have the proper dialogue before it ever happened.
How many of you have family members that have left because of opportunities? How many of you have had children that went away and didn't come back because of lack of opportunity? A lot of my friends, when after college, they didn't come back to Virginia Beach. A good chunk of my family is from this place called Knott's Island, North Carolina, right across the border on the eastern part of Virginia. Today it's still one stoplight town. There's a grocery store that used to be called Jones's because Jones's owned it. One bar called Pearls where I learned to shoot pool with my grandfather, the only bar there. My cousins, when they grew up there, they had one goal in life, and that was to leave. And how sad was that that was the goal, was to leave the area they grew up in. And I mean, so you have to look at some places, and is that situation, does it exist in Southwest Virginia? Are there people that, they love being here, they want to be around their friends they grew up with, their family, but they move away not to come back because the opportunity of their family is not in Southwest? So I'd hate to see anyone leave, especially because they brought in SMR, but at the same time, how many people are leaving because there isn't the opportunity today? And can as the nuclear industry be an opportunity to plug that gap? I think it may be, but once again, it's something this community has to look into.
So this is another one back to the cost. Why are we not talking about the expense of nuclear? It's the most expensive power. This one says the levelized cost analysis of nuclear. It's the most expensive at utility scale. Sure, data centers want it, and they want us to pay for it. Why should this fall on the ratepayers? Do you have anything else to add to previous answers along those lines?
So I don't know if Brian can actually do this in a manner that's easily as understandable. So he's got a spreadsheet that doesn't work on half the computers we have in our office that models this stuff and the levelized cost of energy modeled out. But I will tell you that it is cheaper than wind, that it is affordable, that large companies like Google, like Microsoft, they want this. They will say that's not as cheap as any other electron they can buy, but it's a requirement for them. They want clean energy and they want it reliable. We have companies that, overseas companies, that are talking to Virginia that they want to come and headquarter here, but there's one mandate. Can they get all the energy they need cleanly? And the next thing they'll say, we'll pay for it. We will pay for it, but can we get it? So it's, for a resident, cost is very important, right? For those on a budget, cost of energy is very, very important. But when it comes to economic opportunity, it's not always about the cost of energy for all the players. Because sometimes, like with data centers, reliability is much more important than the cost, and they're willing to pay for it.
About can you be 100% sure that we'll never have an accident from the storage of nuclear waste? I think nuclear's had a really good safety record. We talked about this. Nothing's 100%. Nothing we do is 100% risk-free, and I don't know if anybody has anything else to add.
No, it goes back to, there's a risk you're going to get hit by a car when you walk out of here tonight, right? It's a very, very small risk, but there's a risk. But you're going to do it anyway. And it's the same thing. You can look at the history of the safety of our reactors we have in Virginia. You can look at the analysis that we will send out after this on the safety metrics and processes around this, and make the decision yourself. But you have to weigh what the economic opportunity is. Do we want to fill that 5.6% annual year-over-year gap with dispatchable, reliable, affordable, clean energy? Or do we want to experience brownouts in 4 years in the Commonwealth of Virginia? And that becomes the question. So it's a risk-reward scenario. And I will tell you, like with a lot of things in life, the risk is very little. And I'll go back to saying that the NRC is basically going to it's going to be basically zero for the NRC to approve it to begin with.
Back to SMRs. So this question is, doesn't modular mean that the SMRs would be factory made to cut cost? So how can we count on these construction jobs unless the SMR factory is sited here?
So depending on the technology, some are more modular than others. It's rather interesting. A lot of people call them small modular reactors because of the technology and the size and that sort of thing. But some are more modular from a factory than others. But there is still the demand for the construction jobs to put it together here, or if a lot of it does get built on site. Like I mentioned before, I can't guarantee you that it's 900 jobs to set these things up. Are there jobs? Of course there are. Are there jobs to maintain these things operationally? Of course there are. Is there a supply chain? Of course there is. But depending on the technology, the operator, the developer, what those exact numbers are going to fluctuate. But there's an upside.
This is the nation is importing storage technology. This is a storage question. What energy storage opportunities are being considered in Southwest to complement solar and wind? What new innovative technology for storage can be considered or a pilot for here? So there's a lot of storage. There's storage being deployed on the grid in Virginia. There's a lot of exciting battery technology that's going to become a real part of the solution and really help our energy future. I think that there's so many possibilities for longer duration storage. The innovation really excites our team of folks that look at this kind of technology in the State Energy Office. Does anybody else want to weigh in on storage as a solution? And it's particularly in Southwest Virginia.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for solar plus storage in Southwest Virginia as new solar development happens a lot on previously mined land, that there could be opportunities for storage to go along with that solar opportunity. And I think we're going to see more projects that include storage as the overall project for solar in Southwest.
So didn't NuScale get permission from the NRC to control up to 12 SMRs remotely? If they arrive from a factory and built here, wouldn't those jobs be remote to the region? From NRC, the NuScale in general, didn't they get permission from the NRC to control up to 12 SMRs remotely? And if we had those here, wouldn't those jobs be remote?
Let's take that one back to the office. We'll give that one to Ryan back in the office. And that's going to get technical, and honestly, I don't know the answer to that one off the top.
Why do you tout the number of jobs that will be created for nuclear? You're addressing jobs for constructing SMR, but that does not benefit Southwest Virginia. They would be constructed elsewhere in a factory like in Lynchburg. There would be no benefits to the people of Southwest Virginia. I think you've talked a lot about it. Yes, we need federal funding, but data centers and nuclear reactors do not bring economic boost for Southwest Virginia. About 4 to 5 people work in the data center at Lonesome Pine Airport. SMRs are constructed elsewhere and would be remotely operated. Where are the jobs? Where's the revenue and the benefits to the people in Southwest Virginia? So that's another question about what are the benefits to Southwest Virginia?
The one thing that has not been mentioned yet, and this is about data centers. So before I was in the state legislature, I was on the Virginia City Council for 5 years. We went after getting data centers. We were finally successful. There is tremendous tax revenue from data centers, tremendous. And when you talk to the government people, they'll tell you it's kind of a great win, a ton of tax revenue, but you don't have to build new streets and new schools. It's just kind of money without the what's usually tied to trying to get that money and building new infrastructure. So data centers do come with a lot of tax revenue. So there's money associated there. As far as the revenue and opportunity related to the to SMRs, I think we kind of addressed that. There are jobs for construction. Once again, how many, who knows? There's the supply chain that comes. How much gets built on a site of an SMR depends on the technology and the developer. So I think we kind of handled that one. Yeah.
Revenue over jobs for some communities may be important. I think it's a balancing act, and those are really local decisions a lot of times, and locals have a lot of say in what's permitted in their area through their local zoning authorities. So our SMR is a done deal from Southwest, specifically in Wise County. I think we've answered that. It's not a done deal. It's just hasn't started. So. Why did you do the feasibility study? Virginia Energy didn't do the feasibility, so why was that feasibility study done that we supported with some state funding?
That's the Little Wisco Road. Oh yeah, so that's what we mentioned where we asked to put money into it, and we did, and I think it was helpful information to have, just the concept of are there sites that could even be viable? So.
Here's another one, operation of SMRs, 300 question. So Virginia has more data centers than anyone in the world, and it's driving up our energy demand. Why does Virginia need these data centers?
A couple of things. Like I mentioned with SMRs, there's a workforce that comes around it. Same thing with data centers. If you look at Northern Virginia, there are a lot of tremendous jobs around those data centers, a lot of high-paying jobs around those data centers. There's a lot of revenue that goes to those localities because of those data centers. We are the data center capital of the world. We want to be this and stay the data center capital of the world. Does it take energy? Yes, it does. Does it bring us a lot of economic opportunity? Definitely. You want to talk about a supply chain? So I can't remember off the top of my head how often those servers and that hardware swaps out of some of these data centers, but it's pretty constant. And those aren't cheap racks and servers that we've got in there. So it is a tremendous economic driver for that region and for our state.
So does Virginia Energy believe nuclear is the only viable option to avoid brownouts?
I think Virginia Energy believes also, and I would say the governor believes, that you need to have always on 24/7 dispatchable power to avoid a brownout. The Virginia Clean Economy Act made sure we got rid of all of our coal. It mandated all that out the door. It mandated that in 2042, 2045, all of our natural gas goes away. What is our baseload? When the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing and you can't have natural gas and you can't have coal, where do we get our energy from? And that's the problem. So yes, given the law in Virginia right now, with the Virginia Clean Economy Act, yes, to avoid brownouts, to avoid rolling blackouts, we need nuclear. You need that baseload. It is the foundation of a clean energy system. There's a place for wind, there's a place for solar. It's why the governor didn't say that we have a nuclear energy plan, but we have an all-of-the-above energy plan. There's a place for everything. But there's got to be that foundation that when something else isn't working, when there's a place for DEQ, right? And DEQ is going to get involved in the permitting. Your local government is going to get involved with permitting and zoning. NRC is going to get involved. But when I say that it's not the state of Virginia can't go and say, we want this technology built on this piece of property and make it happen. We don't have that ability. And nor can, unless there's a law passed, but if something is on a piece of property that is permitted and goes through zoning in the locality, and the NRC says yes, and DEQ says yes, the Virginia Department of Energy can't get up and say, hold on, the three of us don't like this. So it's, there's a place for everyone, but no, it's we don't have the ability to make something happen or veto power to stop it from happening.
Gets at some of the underlying concerns and sentiments. Isn't this more about shareholders' pockets than it is about the concern for people here? Aren't we important enough, even though we have a low population? There are safer ways than the opportunities that come with SMR. Yeah, so,
and this is why I appreciate the dialogue, because my question would be, what are those safer ways, right? Yes, you're the ratepayers. You're the most important thing when it comes to utilities. You're more important than the shareholders. And you should be. Now, do the utilities always think that way? I'm not going to answer that. I mean, sometimes, maybe, obviously, there's a shareholder concern, but the ratepayers are important. But the most important thing is the one thing that utilities in Virginia are mandated to do is produce enough energy for the residential use and the consumer use of entities in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the corporate use in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so that's what they've got to do. So when it comes to, the ratepayers are important, but the power has to be someplace. And you're so important that the power has to be produced. And when you say, isn't there a safer way to ensure that the lights always come on, that we don't have a rolling brownout, in conjunction with VESEA, which got rid of all of our coal and is getting rid of all of our natural gas? I can't think of one. I know it's not solar, and I know it's not wind.
So this is another is nuclear clean question. You call nuclear clean, yes, maybe carbon free, but you don't want to talk about what's required with the radioactive waste. Why?
I want to talk about it. I think once an entity, whether it's a private entity or a utility, comes forward and says, we want to build something with this technology on this piece of property, there needs to be a discussion, and there will be a discussion, and I'm sure y'all will make sure there is a discussion about the waste. How much, how often, where's it going to go? It has to happen. We just can't answer the questions right now with that. So we definitely want to talk about it, but the answers you're looking for, how much is going to be generated? How is it going to be handled? Is it going to be shipped? How often is it going to happen? That depends on a whole bunch of decisions that are yet to be made by entities that have not come to the table yet.
So this is another about SMRs remotely, and let me see if I can read the question here. If SMRs can be controlled remotely, can't they potentially be hacked? What are the dangers they present to us? And I wish we had our whole staff here. We do have a brilliant lady that works a lot on energy security. There are other folks at our emergency response headquarters in Richmond. There are people in the SCC, State Corporation Commission, working on these issues. This is a pretty complex issue, but I think there's always concern about any technology, any energy system, your phone, anything could be potentially hacked. So I think this is a real concern for people. I think it would probably be better if we answered that one with some information on a website and get these folks out additional information on it. Because there's a lot being done on it and a lot being thought about and planned for.
Well, not only that, but today, we have 30% of all of our power in Virginia on nuclear. And never mind the fact that the rest of the power we have can still be hacked, right? Cybersecurity is probably the #1 threat to this nation. I mean, the talking points have always been that, if we ever have another world war, it's not going to be fought with ships and planes. It's going to be fought, cyber, across the internet and via hacking. So our utilities today are already tasked with making sure that they lock down their sites. Dominion has an amazing facility that we got to tour, solely set up to make sure and to address the hacking issue. So would it be an issue with the nuclear? Yes, it would be just as much of an issue as we have today with the 2 nuclear plants, the gas facilities, the solar siting, and the other stuff that we have. It's been important for decades and decades. Will always continue to be important.
This one, the Sunbright Mine project to be a data center. Are they requesting an SMR in Duffield? You know anything about that project?
No, I really don't know anything about that project. That'll be one we can look into. I haven't been approached about that project. I know that one of the sites in the feasibility study was down that way, but other than that, you know, that we haven't been informed on that project.
And if I can just so I know it's going on at 8 o'clock, and one thing that we promised is we will be the last people out of this place. If they happen to kick us out at some time around midnight, we may have to do it in the parking lot. But we're committed to being here until every question is answered. But if some of y'all can't stay, please, we didn't set an end time for a reason. This dialogue is very important. Answering the questions are very important. So we're going to stay here. But if you need to go, feel free. But we will be the last people out of this door.
So if you haven't heard the questions, we're trying to get that. And Glenn is talking a lot. And if my voice goes, I got a bottle of water. So while no site has been identified for SMR development, Southwest Virginia has been advertised as a viable site, the solution, without our permission, without the permission from the public of Southwest Virginia, especially far Southwest Virginia. If you don't know, there is a distinction between far Southwest Virginia and Southwest Virginia. I think it was partly because the New River Valley started getting jealous and wanting to call themselves Southwest Virginia, but you're in far Southwest Virginia now.
Far. Well, so we have a whole department called the Virginia Department of Economic Development. Its one goal is to market Virginia. Far Southwest Virginia, South Side, Eastern Virginia. That's his job, the governor's job. The governor's main job, one of his main jobs, is to market and be the salesperson for Virginia. Ultimately, for something to happen in an area, the locality is going to have a say, the citizens are going to have a say. But the most important thing is to see and help make sure that opportunity even becomes into existence, to even give you the opportunity to take advantage of an opportunity if one were to exist. So yes, every day we have a department, we have a governor that believes in marketing Virginia and bringing economic opportunity. And ultimately, when an opportunity arises, the citizens of that area is going to have a tremendous voice on how it goes forward.
So and there's also, you may hear sometimes, if you're in the great Southwest Virginia, which is another part of Virginia.
And the beautiful.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. So have you heard of in-pipe energy?
I have not.
We'll try to learn.
Yep. What was that? In-pipe energy? In-pipe?
Have you heard of, is that I'm saying right, in-pipe energy? We'll look into that.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Isn't it conjecture to say Southwest Virginia will get the supply chain job? Isn't it likely we get SMRs without the great jobs, the risk without the benefits? I think we talked a lot about it.
Sure. Well, so I would say that when things get negotiated, and I can tell you the governor's already made this point, that if a entity wants to come and bring an SMR, he wants the supply chain. He's been very direct about that. And I would expect that if an opportunity were to be available for Southwest Virginia, that a locality, that Southwest Virginia would say, look, we'd like to have the power. If you're comfortable with the facility, the SMR, we'd like to have the SMR, but we want the supply chain. Make it part of the negotiations. Is there a chance you might end up with an SMR without the supply chain? Yep. If you're comfortable with it, if there's still enough advantage for Southwest Virginia. But at the same time, there's a big opportunity that you can get the supply chain with it. And it's part of the negotiation in some cases.
Back to our data centers. Why don't data centers pay a fair price for the power they use? Why pass on the cost to residential customers?
So I would say that they pay a fair price. So much so that this is the interesting thing where we're at today with data centers. So data centers, so I'm just going to throw power out. It doesn't mean it's just round numbers. So let's say you have a data center that wants a gigawatt of power. It doesn't mean they're actually going to use a gigawatt of power. See, remember that 5-9 thing I mentioned where if they have a client, it's going to be on 99.999% of the time? And they take on new customers all the time inside the data center. So a data center literally will go to a utility and say, I want a gigawatt set aside. Maybe they just use 500 megawatts of that. But they say they will pay for the full gigawatt. Now what's happening right now is you have utilities saying, we can't give it to you. We can't give you more than you use because we can't create enough. But when you talk about do data centers pay their fair share, they are offering to literally pay for electrons that they probably will not use just because they have to have it in reserve because of the promises and the commitment they've made to their customers.
This is a nuclear question too, but I think this is something you've cared a lot and talked about. So why don't our leaders bring jobs and programs here without jeopardizing our beautiful mountains while dangling a carrot, but potentially endangering us with nuclear waste? I think this may get into job training, job workforce development that are not around nuclear. Is that something that you think is important for Southwest Virginia?
A couple of things. So Daniel talked about that $1 billion, right, and how much of that, every grant typically comes with a lot of workforce development dollars. And every grant, by the way, that you saw up there, every piece of that $1 billion has a 40% Justice 40 requirement. Basically, 40% of that has to go to underserved communities, which Southwest Virginia qualifies as. So a good chunk of that you're going to see come to Southwest Virginia. So yes, this governor is very passionate about Southwest Virginia. He has been since I ran in the primary for lieutenant governor with the governor when he was running. I got to know him very well. He's very passionate about Southwest Virginia. He made promises for economic opportunity in Southwest. He plans on delivering, and that's the type of person he is. But at the same time, when you see an opportunity, it's going to be broad, and that's for these SMRs. Now, I'll tell you that if an SMR requires you to cut down all your mountains, say no. I mean, it's beautiful. Now, I don't expect that to happen. They're not going to make you do that. But there's a beauty here that you don't want to interrupt. And I'd say that an SMR is not going to interrupt your beauty. It's going to enhance the opportunity for this region. But that's for you to decide when that opportunity arises. But this isn't an either or. It's a both and. You can have your beauty, keep your beauty, grow your economic opportunity, and keep the next generation here. And that's what we're trying to do.
Comment that I'm going to read that I almost missed on the back of this card. One of the problems here is that this area has always suffered from extractive industries, companies that come in, make their money, and leave. That's part of the problem.
Yeah. Look, there's a history of Southwest Virginia. You know, I don't need to tell you. Y'all have lived it, right? And so you're looking at every industry has a flow. There's always a beginning, there's always an end, right? Whether it's the candle, pick whatever, right? Textiles in North Carolina, manufacturing before a lot of the manufacturing went to China. There's always that. The Ford plant in Norfolk, Virginia, where I lived, shut down one day, just basically almost overnight, and we lost a ton of jobs. Y'all felt it with the coal industry. The question isn't, will they stay forever and ever and ever? The question is can you use them for the time that industry is flourishing? Can you be in the beginning and ride it to its high side and create so much economic opportunity that if there were ever to be a decrease, that economic opportunity has created other economic opportunity? In Virginia Beach, we have a three-legged stool. We've got agriculture, we've got defense spending, and I've got tourism. And we've been able to use one to build the other. So if we decrease one, we've got the other two. I would say that the goal isn't to just say, bet the whole future of Southwest Virginia on the nuclear industry. I would say that if there's a whole bunch of economic opportunity here, let that be the foundation. Let that be the springboard to create the economic opportunity, to create the jobs, to bring revitalization back to the area, and then use that revitalization to grab that next industry as well. And should one of those industries, because of political climate or whatever, be impacted, well, you've got one or two or three after that as well. So, yeah.
The same comment earlier about NuScale and the 12 SMRs, but the question in here was, would these jobs, remote jobs, end up in Richmond or Columbus, Ohio? So Dominion or AEP headquarters.
Well, I mean, they could end up here, right? I mean, once again, this is that NuScale thing wasn't a Virginia thing, right? That NuScale thing was a different state. So, but it's developer and technology.
Well, I mean, it's a valid question.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for asking. Will the energy benefit the people here, Southwest Virginia, or go somewhere else? So, the energy generated here, will it benefit us here?
Well, so first and foremost, yes. I mean, it would benefit the people here. I would tell you that probably benefits people further out because, power generated here, you don't have to have some power going west. That power can now probably go east because you're generating more here. So it's fully a rising tide that lifts all ships. Power generation, additional power generation anywhere in the Commonwealth is going to help the Commonwealth as a whole. And so it'll generate the place where it's at as well as other areas. And just to kind of understand how reliable we are interdependent on different things, we don't generate enough power today for Virginia. We import a lot of our power. The whole PJM marketplace that was mentioned, that's 13 states. A lot of power comes from other states on a regular basis, a daily basis. So when we look at, will it help us? Yes, because we're not even self-sufficient on power today. If something were to happen to 4, 5, 6 states, as you go north, they have a serious storm that takes out their gas generation, sun's not up and the wind's not blowing, and they've gotten rid of their coal, and we can't import power, we're going to have a problem. So we are already relying on other states today and their decisions. So any additional power we have here definitely helps Virginia.
This is a multi-part question. I'll try to get to the questions here. I think they've all been asked. You mentioned grants and opportunities for low population areas. Will these low population areas benefit from energy generated by a reactor? Will the people around these areas be expected to pay additional taxes? And then another question about where is the 5.6% growth coming from? You want to take those, the first stab there on the taxes and additional taxes associated with it?
Yeah. So there may not be additional taxes. We kind of talked about this before. I mean, if it comes from a private entity via PPA, you can see no additional taxes. It doesn't have to show up in rates for that perspective. It depends on how it's brought.
And as far as growth, I think obviously data centers is a big part of it. Where to reach a clean energy economy, which a lot of us want, right? A lot of us want to see that kind of economy, and we want to have that in our lives. A big part of that's electrification. So electrification and decarbonizing the electric grid and our continued acceleration into electrifying our lives is going to drive demand. Data centers is just the biggest, most glaring one. We drive a lot of demand with these things that we all love, because we're generating a lot of the need for these data centers, and there's just a lot of changes coming, and I think that growth estimate is probably going to be real or even worse.
Well, and the growth estimate came from Dominion's IRP that they had out there, as well as PJM has recognized it. So it's not the Virginia Department of Energy saying it's 5.6%. It's literally the utilities themselves, as well as the PJM that oversees energy transmission saying that.
This was on the back of the meeting with major developers who?
Who we talked to. So, I can go through a list of, you've got NuScale, and you've got Holtec, and you've got GE Hitachi, and you've got, it's, when I first came aboard, I've reached out to all of them. I think I've reached out to April and said, April, can you set up meetings with some of these people? And we're continually touching base because there's so much change in the technology, almost a monthly basis. So, one thing I can tell you is you've got a very passionate and dedicated team at the Department of Virginia Energy. These guys here today, so many more in the Big Stone Gap office in Richmond and Charlottesville. And what's so important to all of us is we've got to know what's going on. So when something occurs, that we're ahead of the game. So I couldn't run you through too many of the list as far as number of meetings and that sort of thing.
Let's see. Sure, lots of big businesses like data centers want to come here. So we can subsidize them with tax breaks and incentives and pass it on to the rate payers. Is that true?
Yeah, but so, if a data center wants to come here, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go and talk to the local government, right? And the local government's going to have to decide. Now, in Virginia Beach, we decreased the tax on the materials and the tools tax. The tools tax, because we wanted to attract more data centers, because we knew when they came, they paid so much in property taxes and real estate taxes, it wasn't funny. And so we wanted them, so yes, we did a discount. Do y'all have to? That's going to be up to your locality. But I would also mention, don't forget, it's not just data centers. Nucor, and this is just a couple days ago, one of the largest steel manufacturers in the nation, have said that they want to decarbonize their industry. And so they are going to come to one of these 13 states where there can be advanced energy, including SMRs, that they can utilize to decarbonize their steel manufacturing. So when we talk about, SMR brings the data center, an SMR could bring the largest steel manufacturing entity in the U.S. There's just so much additional opportunity. The amount of companies, clean hydrogen, there are a number of companies that we've talked to. They're European companies, a lot of them. Some of them are other parts of the U.S., that they want to produce clean hydrogen for a number of reasons. Part of it is sometimes they want to export it because hydrogen is really key over in Europe, and we won't get into all that. And one of the easiest ways to produce clean hydrogen is from nuclear, pink hydrogen. And so we've got a whole bunch of entities that are looking for where they can go to set up shop to fabricate electrolyzers and fuel cells for the production of pink hydrogen, clean hydrogen from an SMR for sale. So, we may talk about data centers because it's in the news, it's the easy thing to talk about, but SMR clean power is going to bring a lot more opportunity than just the data centers.
This is a comment without a question, so it's not true that onshore wind or solar is more expensive than nuclear. Check Lazard's levelized cost of energy.
So write that down. Did you say onshore? Okay, well, we'll look into that. I mean, that's going to be a Ryan question, and we'll get back to that. I mean, we've looked at the levelized cost of energy, but once again, remember, whether it is or isn't, there are off-takers. There are customers like data centers and Nucor and others that don't care what the levelized cost of energy is. They'll pay more, because the most important thing is not the price, it's the reliability. And these European companies that we're talking to that want to come here, it isn't the price. And in some aspects, it's not the reliability. They will not come unless it's clean. They literally have mandates inside their companies that they are to be 100% clean by a date certain, and they will not come to a state unless they get what they call RECs, which is basically verification that they can buy clean electrons.
This is really about the format. So where's the dialogue? We have to write down the questions instead of orally asking them. That's dialogue. So I would argue that this is great dialogue. And this is great dialogue we cannot ignore. You've written it down. I have these. They'll be in our office. You've put them in writing. We see them. So I think this is Well, I have a lot of stat. Well, they just have come up here, so I didn't pick any order.
Well, I can tell you, we're not leaving until they're all answered. I mean, we're committed to be here, and I don't care what time it goes till.
We can't necessarily be here.
Okay. Okay, so what was your question? Is there what did you write on the thing?
It was quite detailed. I want to know about the jobs. I want to know specifically what jobs there will be, what the pay is going to be, what are the education requirements for these jobs. Frankly, I don't believe that there are going to be local jobs, so I want you to prove to me that there are, in fact, going to be local jobs that are paying well.
Right.
That's dialogue.
Okay, so I would say, so there are a couple ways to look at this. Can I tell you that there's going to be exactly 300 jobs annually, year over year within SMRs here? No, it could be less, it could be more. It depends on the manufacturer, depends on the technology. Are they jobs that require degrees? So there was a recent study done, actually the Lorenzo study that just came out with supply chain looked at this. They predict 50% will require a bachelor's or a lot of industry experience, 50% will not require a degree. When you look at the average salary, it's estimated at $85,000. Would I use empirical evidence? I would. I'd look at what just happened over in Framatome with those 515 new jobs with this average starting pay at $90,000. A lot of the questions you're asking, because I don't know where the SMR is going to go, I don't know who the manufacturer is going to be in the technology, it's hard to answer and give you that exact. What I can tell you is it's worth this conversation going, because the hope is that one day an entity, a private entity, a utility will come and say, I'd like to develop in the Southwest Virginia area, I'd like to use this technology, and then these specific questions that you like specific answers can be asked. And the right people will be on the stage who know what they're going to do and can answer them for you. But I can tell you, yes, I mean, there's got to be jobs. You can't build it without jobs. You can't maintain it without jobs, and there has to be a supply chain to support it. So but I can't go any further and give you numbers.
Coming. And I do think that, this format is allowing us to answer a lot more questions we have gotten into than other formats. There's some people that I know, I'm pretty extroverted, I love to talk and ask questions, that wouldn't ask a question unless they could write it down. So I don't think this is a bad format. I think this has been a great dialogue, even though it was not vocal back and forth. I think this has been a great dialogue. So you keep talking about safety and SMRs when none have been built and none have operated. What are your facts?
So this is, I got to go back to, we'll send this out. We'll send this out with the details around the safety and how they differ from traditional reactors. It's very in-depth, very technical, but I think it's worth the read.
And did the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in 2023 lower the regulations on small nuclear reactors?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, there's only been one SMR that's actually gone through the full NRC process, and that's NuScale. And no. Now, the regulations are different because the technology is different between a traditional nuclear reactor that we may see at Surrey and North Anna and what an SMR is. So it had to be, it had to be created around that new technology. But no, they didn't reduce the requirements.
This one maybe, the locals may know the answer to this one better. Has Wise County's local government approved data centers and SMRs being built in Wise County?
I can answer that, Daniel. Yeah.
Didn't forcing coal out and intentions to get rid of natural gas sort of force us to turn to SMRs? So this is because fossil fuel is going away. Is that what is forcing the move to SMR?
Yes. Dan, do you want to talk about how much energy used to come from coal and what we used to have?
Yeah, I think many of you are aware that, coal was for a long time the leading source for power generation in the United States, not just Virginia. And so, part of what you were talking about, Glenn, is the Clean Economy Act, and it is, by 2045, you know that a lot better than me. You might answer that. But.
Yeah, by 2045, the Dominion territory has to be completely clean. By 2050, the APCO area has to be completely clean. All coal is going to be completely gone. All natural gas will be completely gone. So the answer to the question is yes. It really hurt the Southwest Virginia economy when coal went away, and it hurt the future reliability and affordability of our grid. And we have to find a new baseload power, and that's where SMRs come in and can help fill that.
Another local issues question. The data center mineral gap has been there for 4 years, and Wise County is not able to meet the money demands, and they are threatening to raise our taxes, ? I don't think I know the answer to that. Daniel, no? So according to several local realtors, most land and property sales of recently has been out-of-state people drawn to our beautiful mountains and way of life. You guys let the secret out, didn't you? What did the eyesores like data centers and SMRs have an adverse effect on those property values and I guess the beauty of the region is the question.
Well, I guess, it depends on where it's sited. That makes all the difference in the world, right? And then also, one of the most important things I would imagine when you're looking to move to an area is how reliable is the power? How affordable? How reliable? But the biggest question is the impact of the beauty. And Daniel, if you want to talk about more of the siting stuff and kind of our mine lane and all.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the siting considerations about, even data centers, there's a lot of flexibility, I think, locality that works with those companies coming in a location and making sure that, it's sited appropriately. Even thinking of mine land, there's a lot of beautiful land out there that was previously mined. And I'll say that. And there's a lot of land, working through post-mining land use, over 20-some years now, that's going to go back to unmanaged forest. And there's a lot of pristine areas that you maybe don't want to site things there. So I think siting considerations locally play a part. And the eyesore piece of that too is maybe there's requirements about aesthetics around like data centers, but siting those more appropriately and working with locality and getting community input for siting, I think, is a really important process when anything is located in these communities.
this is kind of to our citing discussion where we shared some of the things that were our responsibility, weren't our responsibility. It says, when confronted with questions more applicable to other entities, such as the NRC, Virginia Energy is quick to disregard. We do not. As a public entity, why is Virginia Energy not asking those entities questions on the citizens' behalf? If you are, why is there a lack of communication?
Well, there's nothing to ask, right? Yeah, because there's no project. And those questions will get asked, and the NRC is going to ask them. I mean, once again, the NRC process is one of the most meticulous processes and difficult processes to get through. And it's not because they don't just talk to you. It's because it has to be completely safe. And they go and check every little piece. I mean, your land has to be perfect. And when I say perfect, Mike, can you talk about what we were talking about earlier, the meteorology and those, I mean, all that stuff that comes to play? It's not just the area, right?
It's geology, it's seismology, meteorology, hydrology, and that's just a small fraction of the list of requirements that the NRC has in place. But we at Virginia Energy, as a state agency, have no control over what those federal requirements are. But they do exist and they are extensive, and we can provide additional information on our website to demonstrate that.
But it's pretty intense.
So when companies learn that we have nuclear reactors in our area, do you really believe that they will bring their companies here? So I think this is saying that nuclear reactors being here would be a bad thing and people would not want to bring their companies here.
I'll tell you that Virginia has lost companies because we don't have enough clean energy for them. So I can't do it in reverse and say, will they definitely come? Because when a company locates, there's a number of reasons why they want to locate, right? It's workforce is very important. The university component to some can be very important. Lifestyle can be very important. When the companies come into an area, transportation, there are some companies, when they call VEDP, the thing is we need to be within X distance of an international airport, period, end of story. And if you're not, they're not coming. But we have had calls, numerous calls, that have come in that have said, we need X amount of clean energy. And if we can't do it, they don't come, they go someplace else.
Nuclear's not clean.
To them it's clean, and that's what matters to them.
So here's one on another grant, a little different subject, but related. Did Virginia Energy give a grant to Wise County Industrial Park to develop the Elam Farm for more data centers? And if so, how much?
Wise County did receive an abandoned mineland economic revitalization grant for Elam Farm. It is not specific for data centers. It's just site prep to add additional acreage and for whatever industry. The application did not specify that it's for data centers. It was just for extension and site prep for the industrial park.
If I can clarify something, just for the last question, just for clarification, because we don't have to debate what clean is. The companies that call, the ones from Europe and others that, they want non-carbon emitting is what so they consider clean, but when they look for define it, for what they define as we don't want a greenhouse gas footprint, and we want non-carbon emitting power supply. So that's the way they define it, and that's.
We have a solution for radioactive waste.
Yeah.
Until we have a solution for that, we don't need to be promoting more.
I can appreciate that, but that's a conversation we have to have when we know what technology is going to be looking at coming. But that's clearly, it definitely needs to be a conversation.
So this is a job question about other technology. Where is the goal to bring solar energy manufacturing jobs to Southwest? We are hearing about the job nuclear bring. What about the jobs we are currently outsourcing to the opportunity filed today? Southwest could help power the Commonwealth with wind and solar.
100%. I believe this is still the case that there's only one set of solar panels that's manufactured in the United States. They're Chinese solar panels. So yes, now if there were entities that wanted to manufacture solar panels talking to VEDP, you better believe that they're talking about, let's talk about Southwest Virginia, let's talk about Southside. They'll help find areas for this, and like I said, Southwest is always on the table for those types of conversations. But there has to be a company that is looking to manufacture solar panels in Virginia, and unfortunately today, they're overseas.
So you mentioned community meetings for the next few months. Does that mean a decision is going to be made soon, or while the meetings for the next few months? So what is the reason for those meetings? Are they set?
No, right now, I don't even know that to my knowledge, there's not a question out there that needs a decision. The reason why we've set these next 4 months of meetings is because y'all have asked to have a dialogue and a continuing conversation. And we've heard you, and the governor's heard you. I mean, the governor literally called me yesterday at 6 a.m. and said, what's the schedule for y'all going out to Southwest Virginia? And I gave him the schedule. I said, it's the next 4 months, and here's where we're going. And he was part of his conversation yesterday. The governor wants to make sure that there's a dialogue. Initially, the thought was we weren't proactive to come out and talk because this is 8-10 years down the road. Once an entity says, we want to build one in Southwest Virginia, and as of right now, no one has come and said, we want to build something in Southwest Virginia, so we didn't start a dialogue. Then, obviously, there was an interest in starting a dialogue that we heard from the citizens here. We had our first meeting in January. There was a concern that it wasn't the format that was desired, which we heard you, and we said, okay. We couldn't come in February. Session was going in February. All my team had to be in Richmond as quickly as things move in session. But we said in March, we're going to start up again. So the reason why we're having 4 of these is because we want to make sure that we're keeping up with our promise to continue the dialogue. And as long as people come out, we will continue having them.
Remember what dialogue is. It's a conversation.
So, I will mention the reason why we did it this way, and Vince mentioned this, but it's really twofold. One is we wanted to be very, very efficient. We wanted to get as many questions asked as possible. Secondly, there are people that are uncomfortable asking a question, and we want that ability for them. And so we wanted to get it as efficient as possible. And I will tell you, if anyone that wants to stay here after we're done, I will have as long as the conversation, 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 or 5-on-1, as y'all want to have. And whatever format of dialogue you want to have, we'll do it.
It would be good because our voices have been stifled
Yep.
at every turn, and it's time that we.
I will stay here. After we get through the Q&A, I will stay here and dialogue with you and everyone else.
We're not coming in quite as fast, so once we get through all these.
Yep, we'll be here.
I wasn't anticipating how many good questions you had, so I'm trying to move through them so we can get to that point for the people that are really wanting to have that. So why are we talking about energy conservation, but only increasing demand? In my state energy office that I now lead, we're talking about that all the time. There's lots of money for energy efficiency, homes, to help make energy efficient homes. That's just not in this meeting, it could be in a future meeting, because we're trying to respond to some of the demands of the citizens who want to talk a lot about nuclear, and we try to make sure we keep that separate today. But we are talking about it, we should talk about it, we should probably talk about it more with you. So this was are the only options for poverty, nuclear reactors. This is an insult to say that.
Oh, no, not at all. It's whatever we can bring, right? It's an opportunity. That's what it is. Any industry that we can bring to Southwest Virginia can grow an economy. I would argue that there is not one in its infancy with the enormous economic growth curve and the supply chain necessary to fulfill it as nuclear. Additionally, I don't know of another industry that will have as many enormous economic spin-offs, whether they are supply chain opportunities or whether it's other industries like steel manufacturing that come with extremely high-paying jobs locating where there's that opportunity. It's not meant as an insult. What it's meant to be is to provide an opportunity to, once again, let Southwest Virginia and help Southwest Virginia be the hub of energy on the East Coast. It's going to be up to y'all to make the decision. Like I said, voices can make this happen. Voices can possibly also kill it. But I think our job, and I say our job, I think the state of Virginia's job, the governor's job, the EDP's job, is to create as much opportunity as possible and put it in front of the citizens of the region to help with things, especially areas where we do have underserved populations, where we do have poverty, which has brought about so many other challenges, and helping the poverty issue can alleviate a lot of that.
So this is back to some jobs, and it says, please name what types of workers would qualify for high salary jobs. Will they just bring those qualified workers here for their salary?
So, so you got you've got welders, you've got electricians, you've got power auditors. Obviously, you've got engineers too, and the engineers here will have, jobs, and they'll probably have to bring some engineers. I mean, it's a heavy engineering field. You'll have, then you have the supply chain that comes with it. So you got fabricators, you've got salespeople, you've got office people, you've got middle management running companies. At that point, and if you bring enough jobs and the population starts to grow with disposable income, then you've got more restaurants that need to be built, and a whole bunch of other things that come into play. It really is a trickle-down scenario, but if you're asking me how many jobs, at what positions, and at what salaries, I'm giving you the speculation. I'm telling you what the studies show. But once again, when that entity stands in front of you, if there's one that shows up and says, we want to do this in Southwest Virginia, that's the question you ask them. What jobs come? And then you've got the studies that say, here's the spin-offs of the jobs that come with that as well.
So this is some comments on data centers use too much energy, there will be insufficient energy, consumers and price rises. Data centers are extremely noisy and provide very few jobs. Question or comment?
Yeah, I just want to, one of the things I think we need to look to provide is a lot more information, because we're getting a lot of questions about data centers and what they are and what they do. And I think it depends on the type of data center, obviously, but I think there's some information we can provide around that.
So this is who says coal has to go away and natural gas has to go away? Who?
The legislators the legislators of the majority party in 2021. So, I mean, look, I was there. It was a party line vote. Vicia was pretty much party line. And that bill passed, and it was signed by then Governor Ralph Northam. And it set those requirements. And the only way that's going to change is if you have a Republican governor, a Republican House majority, and a Republican Senate. And right now we have a Democrat House majority, a Democrat Senate majority, and a Republican governor for the next year and a half or 2 years. So it's just, that's the truth of the matter. But who made that happen? Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's how it happened. It was the House, Senate, and governor.
So this is done by SMRs, economic opportunity, noting the modules will be built off-site, installed by outside experts, likely operated remotely. Where are the jobs for the locals? Be specific on the jobs, education requirements, pay. Are there permanent local jobs? Be more specific.
I think that was a question for the lady that sat over there before, because it sounds very familiar, because I talked about it's 50% probably required degree or significant experience, 50% just a trade, don't need a degree. Yeah. So that may have been that question. Yeah.
This is a follow-up on something you said. So following up on Mr. Davis saying the governor won't pass on nuclear project costs on the residents. The legislature has just passed allowing project costs to be passed on to ratepayers. How does this fit with your claim that we won't pay costs?
Yeah. So the bill that came out of the House and Senate. So when we say bear the risk, it's the risk, the uncertainty, right? It's the risk mitigation that we think we're going to build it for X, it gets built for Y, that additional cost we don't want built onto the ratepayers. What happened, what the bill that passed is when a utility builds a power generation facility, it is allowed by law to go in front of the SEC for recapture of the costs inside the rates. That already exists today. What the bill that is going to the governor's desk does is it allows that utility to go and petition the SEC to recapture those costs quicker than what they can do today. So It's not additional costs that it's the same cost that they can already recapture. It's just quicker. And the reason why it's quicker is the cost of carry to develop a nuclear facility is a lot longer than a solar facility or a natural gas facility. And so they need to recapture some of the funds for their balance sheet is what they're talking about and make it more viable. But it does not allow any more costs to be paid by the ratepayer than already exists inside the status quo that can be petitioned for the SEC. It's just a matter of when it gets recouped.
This is another one on federal permitting. There are efforts on the part mentioned the National Administration of Congress to loosen NRC regulations for SMR approval timelines. Should that be still safer? So are the timelines for SMR being loosened? Should we feel safe with that? If that is
I don't think they're loosening the timelines. What they're trying to do is force efficiency. You know, government is well, I wouldn't say it's not the most efficient form of running an entity. And you hear stories all the time up there that, you know, an application comes in, it goes on someone's desk, that person's out for 2 weeks, it sits there, no one grabs it, right? Things are very slow in the federal government. It's not that they want to bypass, it's not that they want accidents to get made, it's they're forcing efficiency, and that's what they're trying to do. So it's not loosening controls, it's not decreasing regs, they're just trying to make things more efficient. And part of what they're doing is not really just NRC, that what you saw up there with the interconnection. That's another one. It should not take 7 years to get something online and interconnected. We should not have a 5% completion rate of projects that go in the queue. So this is happening on a number of areas that they're trying to grow the efficiency to get things through.
The third consideration being given to the contribution of increasing waste to cause global warming. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know.
This is are increasing nuclear waste contributing to global warming?
I mean, it's on the ground.
Yeah. So the second question here, can we avoid the continued increase in demand with aggressive attention to conservation and increasing efficiency? I think it's all the above. I think we have to do both.
Yes. Well, and I'll tell you a quick story. So Europe, stories always abound in Europe on that they're going to go zero, they're going to go clean energy, carbon free so quickly, and you got Germany right now that, you know, we're not going to use coal, we're not going to use nuclear, right? So I went on a U.S. delegation trip over to Germany. I was there for about a week or so. Stayed in 4 hotels. 3 of the hotels didn't have AC. It's not that it was broke, they didn't have AC. And when I was in government buildings, federal buildings, in 80-degree weather, you can't use AC in the federal buildings. Now, I would say cultures are a little different. Their way of conservation is we don't use AC over here. If we want to not use our AC and our heater, then there's a conversation to be had. I don't think we want to go that route. So is conservation a part of it? Of course. Energy efficiency, like Vince is talking about, 100%. It's a multi-legged stool, right? Conservation, 100%, that's a piece of it. But I would just be very careful to say that we can solve it doing this, especially when we look at Europe for the answer, and we realize the lifestyle that they lead over there and the sacrifice they're willing to make to be able to do that I'd argue Americans probably aren't willing to make that sacrifice, and we enjoy some of the comforts we have.
Here's a local fire department question, which I have no ability to answer with authority. So, have local fire departments been trained to deal with fires and hazards at data centers? How about SMRs? And I wish Randy was here, because she probably talk a lot about this. Does anybody have any thoughts on local response to?
I know it's not SMRs because we won't. I mean, right now there's not even a discussion of having an SMR here. Yeah, we have data centers, so I don't know about that. Yeah.
Requires utilities to install energy storage technology to address base load issues. Why isn't battery storage from solar and wind the focus rather than SMRs?
So, hey Ryan, can you check me? I want to make sure I get these numbers right. So for a 1,000 square foot data center, right, is it 10,000, how many acres is it of solar necessary? For a 1,000 square foot data center? Or is it, we did the ratio of how many acres it takes of solar for a data center? Do you know that offhand? Okay, well, we'll supply that. Yeah, let's put that one on the, yeah, it's just, we're going to move clean energy, but it's crazy when we start seeing these numbers.
I think battery storage is being considered
Yep.
part of the solution, and is being deployed, and will be deployed. The question is what other deployment needs to happen? I think
Yep.
all of those things are happening to meet the demand.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 more, so if anybody wants to dialogue about the cars, tackle the next person that raises cars. We're close. Private companies use non-disclosure agreements. Does this impact our ability to access information about our concerns fact finding?
No. Will there be a time when, the state may have to sign a non-disclosure agreement? Maybe the VEDP does all the time. When a company wants to come to the Commonwealth of Virginia, we ask a lot of questions that are proprietary to that company because we need to know the economic value of an opportunity. So VEDP is forced to sign a non-disclosure, but that doesn't mean that that when that opportunity arises and they come in front of you, that you can ask the question, and they need to answer the question to get your support. So no, non-disclosures that are traditionally signed at the state level do not impact your ability to ask the question and get information.
Talk about the implications of using groundwater and mine water for cooling data centers and or reactor cooling. How would you advise DEP about water issues?
Well, Dylan?
Yeah.
This is just really anything, something about how the water consumed people talk about it.
Yeah, and there's opportunities around, I'll speak specifically about underground mine pools. It's water that is in the void space left over from underground mining. There's many areas in the coal field where these underground mine pools exist. And so one study that we're looking at now is beneficial use of this water. And some of that is around, one example would be a closed loop system to be able to bring water from an underground mine that it's a significantly lower temperature and can be used for maybe HVAC cooling systems, or maybe there's other types of cooling it could, it's a closed loop, so it would go back into the mine pool. A lot of the science around that depends on the size of the mine pool, how much water's there, the rise in temperature. So that's one of the studies we're looking at now, is beneficial reuse of some of the mine water that's out there. And obviously part of that is looking at the water quality to make sure that there's no impacts in that closed loop system. But I think there's going to be, innovation around using water and how it's used for any of these things. And data centers would be one system that could benefit on the energy efficiency side, to reduce how much energy they actually need if you can use that in the cooling system.
You need to talk to a coal miner about what happens to that water. You can't control where it goes. Ask your coal miner. They know.
One of the questions that I
You cannot keep people polluting the water.
one of the questions that I submitted that hasn't been addressed is regarding the ownership of that water or public water, such as in lakes and ponds.
And Mike, if you want to.
We did get a question ahead of time similar to that. I'm not sure if that's exactly your question, but that is on a document that we provided. The Code of Virginia says, and with respect to coal mining, that the void that is left over after the coal is removed is owned by the entity that owns the coal estate. As I'm sure you guys know, surface owners, coal owners, gas owners, mineral owners can be 4 different people or 4 different entities. The law currently says whoever owns the coal estate owns that void.
And was that just a few years old in legislation?
It was around 2012 that legislation passed.
Because I knew there was a proposal where they were asking the legislature to say that they owned the open area that they create from the extraction. We all joked about it, said, so they want to own air?
And These, these property rights cases are very complex and are very fact-dependent and very dependent upon the exact language that is in the deed of severance. So it's really hard to talk in general terms other than what's in the code.
So they own the water too? Yes. Or just the void?
I don't know the answer to that.
The water is the void. Does that react to the law?
Again, that's going to go back to exactly how the severance deeds were written and how a court might interpret that. I can't give you an answer on the water.
Would we also say that it has never been heard in a court case, or is there a?
I'm not aware of one, but that doesn't mean that there isn't one out there.
I don't think there is.
We're almost those who are looking for that, that's a warm-up for it, and for those who are still here, I do not have any questions. Is it true that with the bills about advanced customer payments or SMRs, now before the government, do not require the ratepayer reimbursement if the project's canceled? This is suggesting advanced customer payment bill for SMRs before the governor. Would that require a ratepayer reimbursement if the project's canceled?
So it's up to the SEC. So right now, without the bill, a utility can go and petition the SEC for a power generation facility. And even if that facility doesn't come online because of something transpires, they can still petition and have those costs recaptured. That same ability still exists under this piece of legislation. So yes, under this piece of legislation, as well as status quo, a utility is able to petition the SEC for a facility, and they can potentially recapture even if the entity does not come online.
And real quick, what's the website for tonight's information and video? That's the Virginia Energy website at some point soon?
Yes, and we will be, our website is energy.virginia.gov, and we will be updating it with information once the next meeting is booked. We will also, as I indicated earlier, be putting an electronic copy of the answers to the questions that were pre-submitted online, and information relating back to the first meeting that we had in Lebanon in January.
Now, to hear this question, I'm looking forward to make sure there's not some that drop, maybe got stuck together, but that's all the cards. So, at the end of the card session, and you can take it away with me.
Oh, look, I appreciate everyone coming. I appreciate the tough questions too, and that's what this is about. As you can expect, we didn't come here thinking we're going to get softball questions. We came here because there are some tough questions, but there are questions that need to be answered. And I hope between some of the stuff that we answered earlier on the papers and tonight, you can see that this team is committed to answering your questions. And some of them may not have answers until an opportunity arises. But thank you for that. Thank you for coming here and providing that opportunity for us. Daniel, I don't know if you want to say anything on closing.
Yeah, I really just want to thank everyone for coming, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to be here, and we want to continue the dialogue. I know we can question formats, but I think we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to talk about, what they want to talk about. And Vince, I think you did a good job directing this, and I appreciate that. But please come to the next one if you have the opportunity.
I would suggest for the next one that we have actual dialogue, because if most people have left, I don't feel like it's productive to have dialogue now when there's just a few people in the room. We need to have this during the meeting when the room is full of people.
But if there's value for you to get answers to your questions, if there's value for you in dialogue, then I will stay here and have this dialogue, right? I can't tell you whether there's value in a dialogue between you and I for the 40 people that may have left. But if there's value for you and I to have a dialogue for you, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, here's an example. When we went to the last meeting in Lebanon that you guys held, everyone could not hear the questions, and
Right.
everyone could not hear the answers. We were separated and taken to
Yep.
each table and to ask our questions, and we didn't get answers anyway.
Right.
Because they weren't experts, but we were told they were.
Right.
That's my thing. We need to have a real dialogue.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
a real conversation.
Yep. That's why we had this format today, was to kind of get around some of that.
Okay, thank you.
And if you haven't picked up a copy of the questions, at the very end of that document, which again will be posted online, is our email address where you can send additional questions if you have them, if you think of something and you can't sleep tonight after this riveting meeting. Please email us with those questions, and please email us with your suggestions. If there are other topics that we haven't touched upon yet that you want to hear at future meetings, please let us know.
And Mike, could you just give us some time to get it up? We don't have that big of a team.
Oh, yeah, of course. Some of the team is here and going to be driving back to Richmond tomorrow, so.
And we have one person that does our website.
We know, it's a long way, we've been there.
But it will be up, it will be posted, vaenergy@energy.virginia.gov. The email address is on the document again. Please send us your questions, your comments, and your suggestions for future topics. Thank you.
So I think we could probably take it to the floor.
Yeah. Oh,
Can
yes.
we come join you? Get off the
I'd like to see
stage.
Virginia Energy take as much interest and enthusiasm about the technology of energy storage as it does for so-called advanced nuclear, which is basically the same technology that we've had for the last 40, 50 years. I would like, the cutting edge is energy storage, finding a way around lithium. My son has a friend who worked in the oil and gas industry, and they're got a startup that is adapting the techniques of drilling from that industry for geothermal storage of energy using air pressure, but not at the level of damage to the surface that fracking causes. And so they're using solar or wind to force air into a 10,000 foot hole in the ground, and using the pressure to create pressure which would use it, make it operational for like pump storage, so that you run it through a generator when it comes back up. That's the kind of thing that I think is really cutting edge and would be really useful for Virginia Energy to help us with. I don't see other states going after storage. I mean, that really is the opportunity that's out there. It's really cutting edge.
Yep.
Why aren't we?
Oh, we can have a town hall in the future just on storage. So I would tell you, so Vince and I've had a lot of conversations on storage. We're going after federal grants that we want to use for storage. Storage really changes a lot of this renewable opportunity, the renewable energy. The Virginia Department of Energy is excited about innovation, right? It's for the hockey buffs that we have in here, including the one sitting right here. You know, Wayne Gretzky, always said, don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where it's going to be. I think that was Gretzky, was it? Okay, I got that right. And that's what we're looking at Virginia Energy. It's not just about what the technology is today, right? It's about what future technology we be ready to take advantage of when it's there. So I will tell you that we are passionate. You didn't hear it tonight because we didn't talk much about storage, but I think storage changes the landscape of a lot, and we're very interested in it.
Yeah, we do have.
The website.
Please.
What's your name, sir?
Yes.
Lynn Davis.
And just one thing I'll add on storage is that the Virginia Clean Economy Act contains requirements for Dominion and Appalachian Power to petition the SEC for approval of, I believe it's for Dominion, it's
3,100 megawatts.
3,100 megawatts total of storage, and that's 27 for Dominion and 400 for APCO. So storage is coming, and like Glenn said, we're working on it. And if y'all want to hear more about storage at a future meeting, please send us an email and tell us.
That's you, Daniel.
What, transmission?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit louder? Sorry.
What about transmission? What was your question about transmission?
Transmission lines, but I understand that you probably have to have utility representatives to answer those questions. But they're important. They're in the public arena for wanting answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that gets into, many times those things cross state lines, which gets the federal government involved. There's tremendous cost and questions over how that cost is allocated. it gets really complicated very, very quickly.
Cool.
I'm kind of tired of it.
Director Davis, my question would be, I think you mentioned this for the data centers, but like if an SMR did come to Wise County or any county in Southwest Virginia, for the tax revenue, it's not just jobs that would come in, but would it be personal property taxes, machine tool, also real estate taxes, and if other localities were pitching in to help that particular locality, could they do a revenue sharing agreement to help other localities?
Very much so. It's done quite often in some areas. I would expect this is one of the types of projects I would imagine would be cross-county with multiple localities, and they're sharing all those taxes. Yes, sir.
Thank you, that was Singer.
At a lower speed. Let me give you the microphone.
They probably don't need it, but I'll use it anyway. I was a little disappointed in your rather glib answer to the question about increasing efficiency and conservation. And nice that you brought up Europe. They're way ahead of us. We're way behind. We need to catch up. When the power plant was being proposed, the now supposedly obsolete power plant in St. Paul, I testified that there were a lot of people who wanted that thing, but nobody needed it. I mean, that's obsolete, so I guess we did it. But my point was that there are thousands, tens of thousands, millions of homes in this country, including Virginia, rooms that nobody's been in for 6 months, kept at 72 degrees around the clock. I think the Europeans have got something right. We need to pay attention.
Sir, I appreciate that, and sorry if you thought the answer was glib. I'll share one other thing about the trip to Germany, because I was very excited to go over there, because I wanted to see the advances they had. And you're right, there are some advances they do have. I was kind of taken aback when it came to the air conditioning thing, but I'll tell you another one. I was in the, I think it was the Minister of Energy's office, and they had a team there, and there was 14 of us. And we said, what are you using for base load? And because obviously a lot of wind, right, the North Sea, and they have a lot of wind energy, a lot of solar energy. They have a lot of power purchase agreements with, or partnerships with other countries. And I said, what are you using for base load? And they said, batteries. And I said, but we don't have long-term battery storage that's truly viable yet. And they said, well, we don't have that yet. So right now, I think it's 12 plants, they told me. It's 12 gas plants, natural gas and hydrogen gas plants they rely on in other countries to get their base load. So when we talk about Germany having clean energy production, they do. They don't use natural gas in Germany. They import it from another country. So I do agree that we need to learn from the technological advances of other countries, but we also need to pay attention to some of the realities, because in politics and especially on a global scale, sometimes what they say is not necessarily the reality. And when I see an entity bringing in natural gas from another country and saying it's all clean over here, I kind of look the other way.
On the point of energy efficiency, just a couple of things. The Clean Economy Act instilled an energy efficiency resource standard that requires the two main investor-owned utilities to reduce the amounts of energy that they sell through energy efficiency conservation programs. That's in the law today. Also, it's gone. The first two items that we had on the list of grants are home energy efficiency rebate programs. $90 million a pop, 2 programs. That's coming your way very soon. Thank you, Vince. Daniel, sorry. So those things being tackled, efficiency is absolutely a part of the solution to the problem, and there are steps and programs coming to help make that happen.
I hope that's as aggressive as you have been tonight. SMNR. Did you learn the history of nuclear power in Germany while you were there?
No, they won't use nuclear over there in Germany. I mean, we know why they won't use nuclear over there, but we didn't talk about nuclear at all. They don't use it. We were there to talk about renewable energy over in Germany.
They started out with it and then did away with it.
Yes. Yeah.
And thank you for your long time back in my life for not listening to it. I was at those years for UCHAT as well, working too. And it was a very exciting time for all.
I thought you probably couldn't read my, the first part of it.
Yeah,
I thought that was probably it. But the first part of it was about the fact that we, with our popular use of energy, anytime that you make an energy transfer, a lot of the thermodynamics kick in, waste heat. And years ago, when the people in Utah claimed that they could do fusion in a test tube, turned out it didn't work. Fortunately. I asked a question on an exam. What would be the long-range effect if nuclear fusion could be done with water being sourced and there be unlimited energy? What would be the consequence of that? The consequence of it is that we would use it and we would generate more waste heat than the Earth is capable of dispersing back into space. And that, perhaps ahead of fossil fuel use, would heat up the Earth and do what fossil fuel use is doing now. And I just picked up a textbook that is a little over 20 years old now, and it still gave the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere as 0.03%. That's 300 parts per million. So it's a little easier to deal with that figure. Okay. Last year, we passed 425 parts per million. And what we've done is increase the thickness of the blanket over the Earth. And any of these things we do, burning fossil fuels, or if we had your wonderful fusion.
It sounds like it's ready, but maybe it's
When you said that nuclear fusion might be 10 years down the road, it's actually 93 million miles.
Can't recreate the sun, so it's
That's what you're trying to do.
It sounds wonderful from the science perspective, but you're right, maybe it's a curse in the long run.
Yeah, the persons that we would use, we are not.
We're not exactly always responsible. You are correct.
Not quite there yet. We're figuring out how to keep this planet livable.
Who else? Who else is so committed to be here? Saul.
Or feel free to come up, or feel free to walk up here.
These jokes and our stands time to time. They have to hear you
Let's have more dialogue though.
But I think not bad. This is kind of scary for bad. Want to say something?
We should have done this when everybody was here. That's all I'm saying.
We do have a lot of questions, and we do. We're all right.
That's okay.
And
What's
we
wrong
would,
with
I
that?
think we would have got this.
I'm not going to call you no green. I'm just going to say that you and Daniel and Rick's done a really good job. I don't have any. I'm saying over here, I even have anything to say. All you want money long.
I actually got to have lunch in softball with him on the way here. And then he came over here and came back.
Well, it is a lot. I agree.
So we'll continue to think about formats and about meeting spaces and,
I like the dialogue, I like the discussions, I like to be able to sit down and talk to somebody. I don't like to be talked to.
So I've been involved in a lot of RFPs over the years, not controversial. And what you can have is you can get people that just want to come, make a whole lot of noise,
Yeah.
and then the dialogue becomes, it becomes shouting, it becomes unproductive back and forth. And sometimes we, have been involved, come up with strategies and maybe get more people heard, and maybe it's not for everybody. And then we try to make it format. You've seen two different formats so far. Which one did you like better? This one or the first one?
Oh, the first one was much worse with the dentist.
Could I say something?
I'm sorry, absolutely.
First of all, we do really appreciate having the meeting. It's raised a lot more questions. But it's 16 months in coming. We've been asking for this since the governor made his announcement in October of 22. So yes, we would like to have more information and more dialogue. So we would like to say that. The second thing I wanted to say was, when the governor came here, this was his moonshot, the first SMR here in Southwest Virginia. And then yesterday, I don't know if this was planned, off the cuff, in response to a reporter, he said, well, Southwest Virginia possibly will not meet the first site. And then we saw some of the reasons that we went into. So I don't expect you to have an answer to this, but people are saying, wow, y'all won, congratulations. We're being very cautious because he did say maybe they would be one day. Okay? But it raises a lot more questions. And we will be following up with Southwest Virginia Nuclear Watch, and we are a burgeoning grassroots movement. And the people that came out were concerned that they are a small number compared to the numbers that came to our 12 community meetings and have over 1,000 have signed our petition. So we're here, we're involved, and we'll stay involved. And we would like you to be more involved with what is going on in the state and our local officials.
Yes, ma'am. No.
Personally, I hear you. Maybe it should have been sooner, and I think we all learned from that, and maybe the opportunities were not handled as they should. I do want to say that Director Davis has been willing to be here now and is committed to continuing this dialogue. So I hope we will get some grace, in some of the mistakes we made. And I would be curious who your artist is for your signs, who your creative is.
Yeah, you get an A for creativity. I sent that picture of the billboard. We passed the billboard on the way up. I sent it to my wife. It's creativity is, yeah.
Well, this is all internal. We have, as you can see, very intelligent people living here, experts, creative artists. So that's all. That's something.
Yep. And I can answer, if you like, real quick on the governor's thing. We had mentioned that the state can't make something happen, can't really stop something happen. The governor is very passionate about Southwest Virginia, wanted the first one to be here because of all the economic upside and all the opportunities we discussed. But there are other localities that have nuclear today that want to have another reactor. There are, and I don't know of any utility that's actually said we want to go build one and we want to build it this time, but there have been other localities that said we'd like another one. And there are parcels of land that have already been through the NRC process. Specifically, you've got North Anna, right? Another parcel of land went through that back in the 2014, 2015 timeframe. That it go through the NRC process now quicker. And that's why the governor said it may not be the first, because we can't make Southwest the first because we don't decide where it goes. And because of movement on localities that want the economic upside, they know they're safe because they already have reactors there, and they're making noise that it very well likely may be down there. And that's why he made the comment he did.
I will say this. We also, when there's other communities want this, Are they talking about the local officials? Are they talking about the people? And the other thing is, as we know, all across the nation, Louisiana has an area they call Cancer Alley now because of the impact of large corporations, the effects they have on the people. So even North Anna and Surrey, I've got to do my geography better, but we're already in communication with groups across the state, and we want to know if those are located in vulnerable communities, people of color, and we want to be sensitive to everyone. So
Yeah.
if we don't get it here, and someone else wants it, that's their choice.
Yep.
But we want to make sure it's the people's choice.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yep.
I did wonder over this part of the room, these two ladies have been really diligent in listening, providing questions, and I offered her the mic, and what did you say you would say?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you, Mike. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank everybody for your questions. I learned so much tonight. I'll just go ahead and say I am pro. I do think it is a great idea to bring something like that here. Big Stone Gap, I'm born and raised in Big Stone Gap. I love my hometown. I want to make sure our hometown is safe. So everything that you guys can do to make sure that we stay safe. And while I want to see the growth. I actually was born and raised here. I moved to Richmond, Virginia. I lived there up until 2 years ago. I bought my grandfather's house here, so they were going to sell it. I said, you're going to sell it, you're going to sell it to me. And we moved back here. My husband actually works in Richmond still because he could not find a job here. And every time that he tried to go and get a job, he has a master's degree in commercial refrigeration. He could not find a job here. So he has had to drive back and forth, and I take care of the 3 kids by myself back home. I want growth for this area. I love our hometown. I think this is a great opportunity as long as we handle it like we always do. We handle everything with care. We care about each other and we love it. So let's keep these opportunities rolling for our next generation. And let's just all see if we can come together as a community and make sure that we, nourish it, help it grow, and be the best people that we can be. Thank you guys for everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
And, I think a round of applause for you who takes care of 3 kids like yourself while you try I want to take another moment to thank our campus police,
Yes.
our sound person who has been here working in the background and making sure we're all safe and we're in a safe place. And I commend everybody for their public report and behavior in public meetings and for your patience with us, tolerating the format of the show and all the stuff here. If anybody wants to bring us home with the last word, any burning last question before we let the director have a break? So I think that concludes the Energy Education Series number 2. More to come. I'm sure you will be following our social media, following our website to see when and when we're at. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.